Chapter 1909 Yang Xianlu appears. Chapter 1909 Yang Xianlu appears. Ling Han showed a smile. By now, he had reached the 4th severance peak stage, and was only an opportunity away from advancing into the 5th severance. He had definitely cultivated the 4th severance to a completely perfect, flawless extent. And added with the fact that he had too many trump cards, merely the 2 source powers of heaven and earth were enough to make any celestial king blush with charmite. Would be really strange if he didn't win in a battle of equals. However, the Empress had not refined the heavenly Dao Jade. If she could accomplish the leap over the Dragon's Gate, she would be able to push open a completely new set of doors, increasing her battle prowess to the true supreme pinnacle. Such as Yang Xianlu. The 5th severance. Was there any 5th severance elite here? Ling Han's eyes swept over the masses, but though each and every prodigy's pride skyrocketed, with them possessing astonishing self-confidence, all of their auras were incredibly reserved. It was completely impossible to estimate their cultivation. I am Dongmen Hong. I feel an itch in my fists just from watching. Who would be willing to fight me? A man with a tall build leaped out. He was incredibly bold, his hand already holding a purple machete that was as long as 3 meters as he issued a challenge to the masses. I will. A young man in yellow leaped out. He did not say much nonsense, and immediately charged into an intense battle with Dongmen Hong. For prodigies like them, they were all maniacs of cultivation. Seeing that there were already 2 pairs that were engaged in fierce battle, and their skill was extremely high, not in the slightest bit inferior to their own, the others couldn't help but feel their fighting spirit ignite. More and more people entered the fray, launching an intense battle, which later turned into a battle royal. In the end, one's opponents could be distinguished any longer. They simply attacked anyone they saw. It was really complete chaos. Only a minority were not dragged into this chaotic battle, and stood farther away, watching with their arms crossed over their chests. Brother Lao, when Yang Xianlu comes later, he'd probably be infuriated to see this scene, right? A spectator commented in amusement. However, when his eyes passed over the great battle chaos, his eyes were filled with contempt. There was a youth in purple standing next to him. He was incredibly dashing and handsome, and his complexion was exaggeratedly fair. He was as smooth-skinned as a woman. Not just that, his features were also delicate and pretty, and his brows thin and long, appearing to be very feminine. If it were not for the fact that he had an Adam's apple, others would really think that he was actually a woman pretending to be a man, and a very unsuccessful disguise at that. The purple-robed youth smiled, revealing 2 rows of snow-white teeth as fine as shells. If you make a move, you will be able to suppress all of them in a single move. When he spoke, one could tell his voice was high-pitched and thin, as if he was a eunuch. Normally, even if he was really a eunuch, when one had cultivated to celestial tier, any missing limbs could be regrown, so there would not be anything like handicap or cripple. Haha, that is Yang Xianlu's business. What business is it of mine? The first person said. He was dressed all in white, completely spotless, appearing to be very unconstrained. The youth in purple smiled again. Then what are you saying now? I heard that you have a lot of interest in Yang Xianlu, so aren't I just creating a chance for you so you could approach Yang Xianlu? The young man in white said smilingly. Sure. The youth in purple suddenly made a move. His right hand was as flexible as if it was boneless as it turned into a snake. Furthermore, it was a golden snake. The snake's mouth opened widely, revealing 2 fangs as it bit at that young man in white. A frightening aura rippled out. Boom, under the shockwave, the battle royal came to an abrupt halt. Everyone looked over. It was too devastating. It was as if they had seen a source beast of heaven and earth that was suddenly showing its might towards them. Ha ha ha, Laro Song, I knew that women have poisonous heart. The young man in white pressed down. Boom, a white screen of light appeared in front of him. Multiple patterns of great Tao bloomed on it, capable of suppressing the heavens and setting the universe. Boom, the golden snake bit down, but could do nothing against this white screen of light. Shan Jitong, are you courting death? Laro Song asked menacingly, his voice shockingly sharp and high-pitched. That would depend on whether you have that ability. The young man in white, Shan Jitong, laughed loudly, not the slightest bit afraid. The 2 great elites clashed. A boundless aura rippled out, turning into a gigantic serpent behind Larosong. It was completely golden, and there were patterns of great Tao on it, but not a single one could be distinguished clearly. It was like chaos. The great serpent coiled its body. It was at least 30,000 meters tall, its aura devastating as if it was capable of shattering the heavens with a slight movement. An image also appeared behind Shan Jitong. That was a white sword, and looked as if it was forged from a sword. It seemed capable of shattering at the slightest touch, but was completely able to resist the might of that giant serpent. Fifth severance. Ling Han and the Empress exchanged a look, and spat out these two words at the same time. The fourth severance definitely could not possibly be this strong. Only the fifth severance could reach this kind of height. Merely a ripple of aura was enough to make severing mundane tears feel as if they had fallen into an abyss as their hearts and spirits trembled. True enough, the gathering of prodigies had other fifth severance elites aside from Yang Xianlu. That is, Source Snake of Heaven and Earth. Bewitching Maiden Ru said in a shaky voice, her pretty face bearing an expression of fear, feeling an indescribable terror. Source Snake. Ling Han had heard of source powers of heaven and earth, like the Nine Heavens Flame and Shenyang Source Water, and also knew of the Chaos Source Rock. It was said to be the first rock that had formed when heaven and earth were split apart. However, what the heck was a source snake? When the heaven and earth first split apart, there was initially nothing, but as heaven and earth improved, the first batch of living creatures appeared, and they are collectively called Ancestral Source. Small Tower suddenly spoke up. The first dragon in the world is called the Ancestor Dragon, Source Dragon, and the first phoenix in the world is called the Ancestor Phoenix, Source Phoenix. Then, the first snake that was born in the world would be called Source Snake, the ancestor of all snakes, Source Snake. What level is it? Ling Han asked. Ancestral source creatures are definitely at Celestial King tier. However, for different source types, the height that they could reach in the Celestial King tier would also be different, Small Tower said. The strongest is naturally the likes of Ancestor Dragon and Ancestor Phoenix. Ancestor Snake is also considerably strong. It could be 7th heaven, or 8th heaven. Without unique luck, there should be no hope that it could reach 9th heaven. Ling Han nodded. This Larosong had to be an heir of the bloodline of Source Snake. However, it was unknown whether he was a snake that had taken human form, or he personally was human but had cultivated the techniques of the Source Snake. Thinking about it, the chance of the latter being true was not very high. He should be a descendant of the Source Snake to be able to reach this kind of height. Ling Han's blood for battle bubbled. There was not just a single fifth severance here. Perhaps just watching these people battle would be enough to help him complete his breakthrough. He and the Empress both watched closely. This was the first time that had really seen fifth severance elites. Merely feeling that kind of aura was enough to help them gain a sliver of a chance of breaking through. He, Brother Lao, Brother Shan. What's going on here? Even if my reception is not satisfactory, there is no need for the two of you to get into a fight, right? Amidst laughter, a young man in embroidered robes was approaching, stepping on air. He was moving at a very fast speed. There were 3 young people behind him, and they were 2 men and a woman, respectively. All had the bearing of giants among men. Yang Xianlu. Both Larosong and Shan Jitong withdrew from the clash, and turned to look at this young man in embroidered robes, revealing a strong wariness in their expressions. A fourth severance could never imagine how strong Yang Xianlu was. Only freaks that were similarly a fifth severance like them knew just how strong this young man was. He was so strong that it would practically drive others to despair. A divine fetus that had been born on the celestial path. By birth, he had an affinity to Tao, and could learn any celestial technique at first attempt, and gain mastery upon learning. In fact, he could even surpass the person who had invented this technique in the first place. This really was possibly a unique child that had been born from heaven and earth, and was destined to be unmatched. Ling Han, too, couldn't help but feel his interest spike. He looked towards Yang Xianlu. He had heard countless times of this person. In fact, his ears were probably going to get scabs from the many times he had heard about him, but he had never had the chance to see him before. Chapter 1910 Absolute Monarch Tier. Chapter 1910, Absolute Monarch Tier. Yang Xianlu was handsome, but not as word-shakingly pretty as Larosong, and was just ordinarily good-looking. However, when Yang Xianlu appeared, whether it was Larosong or Shan Jitong, their graceful bearing was suppressed as if they had become the background to set off his brilliance, dim and dull in his presence. They were all at the fifth severance, but there was actually such a huge gap. The king of the celestial path was definitely not just an empty boast. Yang Xianlu's expression was calm, but the three followers behind him could feel a sliver of anger from their master. He had invited others to gather here, but the host had yet to arrive, and the guests had actually come to blows already. Could it be that they thought that just because he had not personally seen it with his own eyes, he was unaware that a battle royal had previously occurred here? If this spread out, it really would become a joke. Someone actually dared to create trouble at the feast that he, Yang Xianlu, hosted? We were just playing around to pass some idle time, Shan Jitong said smilingly. His figure was as upright as a sword. It was naturally impossible that his bearing would weaken in front of Yang Xianlu. Fifth severance meant monarch tier, so how could a monarch tier possibly fear anyone? Meanwhile, Larosong directed a gentle and reserved gaze at Yang Xianlu. His eyes flickered green, and there was an indescribable emotion in them. Previously, Shan Jitong had mocked that he was interested in Yang Xianlu. It looked like this was not just empty words. There really existed this kind of possibility. Yang Xianlu only smiled faintly, but did not pursue the matter. He raised his head to look at the skies. That massive sun had gradually dimmed, and a bright moon was beginning to exude its luster, while the sky was covered with stars that shone brilliantly. There is still some time left until the three stars align, he said calmly. Since everyone is getting impatient from waiting, let's all just sit down then. He took the lead to sit down, and it was as if his movement had a powerful influence. A considerable number did not even realize it themselves as they sat down with him. Only then did their expressions shift drastically. Every move of this person could actually influence others, and affect even such top-notch emperor tiers like themselves. Only a limited number were exceptions, such as Shan Jitong, Larosong, Ling Han, and the Empress. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was standing with support from Ling Han, while Bewitching Maiden Ru was assisted by the Empress. This was a woman of the Ling clan, so how could she be affected by outsiders? In addition, there were 5 others that were standing. They were not monarch tiers, but rather possessed the potential to break through to become monarch tiers. Yang Xianlu's eyes wandered over the group. When his eyes passed over Ling Han and his group, he paused slightly, but his eyes immediately wandered away. Even the Empress and Bewitching Maiden Ru could not garner a second glance from him. This person's willpower was frighteningly staunch. Ling Han smiled at the Empress. They drew out a stone chair from within their spatial god tool, and then sat down. They would sit, but it was definitely not because of a command from Yang Xianlu. Yang Xianlu revealed a smile filled with hidden meaning. His eyes swept over the masses, taking note of those few that were capable of standing upright. These were the true people he wanted to recruit. The rest were ordinary, and he couldn't even bother himself to recruit them as his subordinates. All of you have traveled far, thank you, he spoke up. I have invited everyone here firstly so we can discuss cultivation together. Hee. Shan Jitong immediately showed an expression of disdain. To discuss cultivation with these people? Yang Xianlu, has your head been kicked by a donkey? Are these people even worthy? He was a monarch tier. What king tier or emperor tier was worthy of being his equal? What did you say? A considerable number stood up, their faces filled with indignant fury. Isn't that the case? You all are just a bunch of trash. Shan Jitong scoffed. Even if all of you joined forces, I would be able to suppress you with only a single finger. What right do you all have to discuss cultivation with me? Isn't that just a joke? You can give it a try. A youth in green leaped out, 3 silver horizontal lines on his forehead. Shan Jitong glanced at him, and disdainfully said, Silver clam race? I remember that a so-called prodigy emerged from your race, called Ha Ming or something, and I suppressed him within 3 moves. He could not even hold up to a single blow. The expression of the youth in green changed swiftly. Pointing at Shan Jitong, he exclaimed, You are the 7 Swords Demon King. And now, do you still wish to exchange blows with me? Shan Jitong asked calmly. The face of the green-robed youth flushed red, and then turned green. Yet he simply turned around and left. He had directly fled. The harming that Shan Jitong had spoken of was a senior that was a good few generations older than the green-robed youth. When he had been in the severing mundane tier, he, too, had been invincible once, and was acknowledged by the race as the person that had the highest chances of becoming a celestial king. However, Harming had gone out on a training trip once, and was horribly defeated by a severing mundane tier. From then onwards, his Dao heart was completely lost, and he had become completely ordinary. The person that had defeated him was called the Seven Swords Demon King. That was because all his opponents would definitely lose within 7 strikes from his sword. The youth in green did not know that this Seven Swords Demon King was Shan Jitong, or he would definitely not dare to provoke the latter. When Harming had been defeated, Shan Jitong had still been a 4th severance. The two of them had been equal in cultivation level, and there had been no suppression in terms of cultivation level. And the youth in green knew himself well. Whether it was in terms of natural talent in cultivation or strength, he was greatly inferior to Harming. He had no wish to have the same ending as Harming. Everyone was shocked. The youth in green was a prodigy that had recently risen from the silver clam race, and had a cultivation level of 4th severance peak stage. His battle prowess was astonishing, but he had actually been scared off into flight with a few words from Shan Jitong. This was really hard to imagine. Hiss, the Seven Swords Demon King. After a moment of shock, realization finally dawned on them. As it turned out, Shan Jitong was that mysterious Seven Swords Demon King. In the past, there had once been a young elite swordsman issuing challenges everywhere, and who knew how many severing mundane tier prodigies had been defeated within 7 strikes from his sword. For some, even their Dao heart had crumbled. But 30,000 years ago, the Seven Swords Demon King suddenly disappeared without a trace. Now that they thought about it, Shan Jitong should have been at the 4th severance peak stage at the time, and had issued challenges everywhere for the sake of breaking through to the 5th severance. Clearly, Shan Jitong had succeeded, and that was why he had disappeared 30,000 years ago. That was because there was no need for him to travel around and issue challenges anymore. Yang Xianlu, exactly what have you invited us here for? Shan Jitong asked impatiently. Though Celestials had a limitless lifespan, he was not willing to waste his time on meaningless affairs. Yang Xianlu smiled calmly, but said something that was completely off-topic. This 3 Young Peak is the place where my master achieved Dao. When he succeeded, 3 stars aligned, and the unusual scene was astonishing. This time, it is the anniversary of an epoch since my master achieved Dao. My master has predicted that a bizarre event would once again descend from the heavens, and the one who could ascend to the peak would gain great fortune from the heaven and earth. He looked at Shan Jitong and Laro Song. As expected, both of them looked tempted. He continued, the reason that I have not broken through to the dividing soul tier was precisely because I have been waiting for this day. Since there is something as good as that, why did you summon us? Laro Song asked. Today is the day the 3 stars align. The Celestial King tier level might here will decline to its weakest, but even so, it is not everyone that would be worthy of climbing the mountain, Yang Xianlu said calmly. I have never minded contesting with others. Furthermore, I have another important matter. What is it? Shan Jitong asked. In the area, only he and Laro Song were worthy of speaking to Yang Xianlu like equals. There is no rush yet, Yang Xianlu said calmly. Without reaching the mountain's summit, even if you knew, there would be no meaning to it. Chapter 1911, Climbing the Mountain. Chapter 1911, Climbing the Mountain. Without reaching the summit, they didn't even have the right to know. Ling Han was also interested. What exactly did this Yang Xianlu want to do? To set foot in the place where the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King had achieved Dao was a once-in-an-epoch opportunity, yet he took it out to be shared with others without hesitation. Just how generous was he? Furthermore, even the right to participate could only be obtained once they reached the summit. Just what major event was that? Could it be that it had something to do with the storm of darkness? Ling Han was expressionless, yet said to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, Fonga, you go into the spatial god tool first. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden nodded gently. To say nothing of the fact that she was not king tier level, she hadn't even advanced into the severing mundane tier, so she naturally did not have the right to climb the mountain. She didn't even have the right to make an attempt. Ling Han drew the heavenly phoenix divine maiden into the black tower. As for bewitching maiden Ru, he naturally couldn't be bothered to care. Sigh, some people, really. Bewitching maiden Ru sighed deliberately. Ling Han only acted as if he had not heard. It was fine as long as he ignored this bewitching woman. Otherwise, she would only become more and more stirred up. The time for the 3 stars to align is here, Yang Xianlu suddenly declared, pointing a finger at the skies. 3 bright stars appeared, and were orbiting on a specific course. We can now climb the mountain. The Tao of heaven and earth is already channeled. Whoever can reach the summit first, and sits on the great rock which my master had sat on to comprehend Tao in the past, will be able to gain the greatest fortune. Therefore, everyone, start moving. An aura that could not be named rippled out, and some mysterious change seemed to have taken place on the mountain peak, yet one could not really say what this change was. Yang Xianlu was the first to set out. He took a step, already beginning to ascend the mountain. Laro Song and Shan Jitong also moved at almost the same time. They were only a single step behind. The 3 of them advanced together, heading towards the summit. Yang Xianlu's 3 followers, meanwhile, remained where they stood, and did not follow. They looked towards Ling Han, all showing an icy expression. Zhao Qingfeng had been killed by Ling Han. They naturally saw Ling Han as an enemy. If it were not for the fact that Yang Xianlu forbade them, they would definitely have made a move by now. Ling Han naturally would not take them to heart. They were only equal in strength to Zhao Qingfeng. Even if he stepped on them, he would not feel anything. If they were defiant, he merely had to stomp them flat. Ling Han took the Empress's hand. The latter was restless. No matter what, she wanted to find out just how wide the gap was between herself and top-notch prodigies. Unafraid, others also showed fighting spirit. Who did not want to become the most supreme of king tiers, and look down on the rest of the world? This was a great opportunity, the place where a celestial king achieved Tao, the cycle of a whole epoch. This kind of fortune would be astonishingly great. Ling Han looked at the Empress, and said, perhaps this is the chance for us to reach the 5th severance. The Empress nodded. Previously, though they had not exchanged blows with 5th severance elites, they had felt the auras of this level. They could claim to have gained a solid understanding. If they gained a great fortune, and refined the heavenly Tao Jade, then perhaps they would be able to advance to the 5th severance already today. When the 3 stars aligned, as expected, the strange aura on this mountain peak dispersed considerably. No longer was it difficult just to set foot on the mountain. However, this was still extremely difficult. Though Yang Xianlu and his group looked very carefree, that was because they were 5th severance elites. While they were in the severing mundane tier, their strength was completely on the level of the dividing soul tier. To say nothing of others, merely when Ling Han stepped forward, he could feel a frightening pressure assault him, making him as if his spine was about to bend. The Empress was still fine, only showing an expression of slight strain, but bewitching maiden Ru exclaimed in shock, and almost collapsed on the ground. Beauty, let me help you up. 2 big hands stretched out. The man said he was going to help her up, but judging by the angle at which he was extending his hands, he clearly planned to pass right under bewitching maiden Ru's arms, and directly grab her breasts, which was extremely perverted. And it just so happened that bewitching maiden Ru had collapsed from feeling this aura, and had no way to dodge at all. She could only show an expression of humiliation and fury. That man was a slender, tall youth in purple. A sliver of an evil grin curled up the corners of his lips. He naturally was doing it on purpose, and his motive was to take advantage of her. Of course, he, too, had absolute confidence. With his identity, strength, and status, he only had to crook a finger, and this delicate beauty would definitely throw herself into his arms. His hands tightened, and he was just about to feel secret pleasure in his heart when a strange feeling suddenly rose up with him. This feel is not right. Firstly, it's too hard, and secondly, The shape's not right, either. Fuck. His eyes widened, and he saw that what his hands were holding were not the plump breasts of a beauty, but rather 2 feet. There was even dirt staining the soles of the shoes, and they were quite dirty. I am not an easy person. Why are you holding my feet? Ling Han asked smilingly. The young man in purple hurriedly released his grip and stepped back, looking like he could not retreat fast enough, and bearing an expression of loathing. He glared angrily at Ling Han. Previously, it had precisely been this guy that had interfered, grabbing bewitching Maiden Rue and tossing her to the sidelines, and placed himself in her position. Of course, it had been feet. Even the mere thought of this made him feel disgusted. Though Ling Han had no intention of taking that bewitching woman for himself, they had been travel companions, so he could not bring himself to just sit back and watch as the latter was being taken advantage of. Thus, he had resolutely made a move just now. He smiled calmly, and said, "You have groped my feet, so how do you plan on compensating me for it?" The purple-robed young man's lips crooked up slightly, showing a menacing expression. What a guy, he actually dared to play around with him. "Oh, I know now. You are the newly promoted Holy Son of Alchemy City, right?" this young man said, having recognized Ling Han. Previously, Alchemy City had invited all the forces in the world to watch the ceremony, and the White Sun sect that this young man belonged to also received an invitation. However, White Sun sect was a 6th Heaven Celestial King tier level sect, so how could they possibly condescend to attend? This invitation from Alchemy City definitely had to be sent out. This was a respect that was demanded, but whether White Sun sect attended or not, that was up to them to decide. They were too high and noble, so if they were in the mood, they could give some face, but if they were not happy, they could choose not to come. However, Ling Han's appearance and image had spread to practically all the forces in the entire Eastern Celestial Realm. This was an advertisement. "This is the Holy Son of our Alchemy City. If you encounter him in future, remember to give some face." Ling Han thought for a moment before coming to a realization. He said, "There is no use trying to worm your way into being my friend. Pay up for my compensation." The purple-robed young man couldn't help but feel his mouth twitch. He had touched Ling Han's stinky feet in a moment of carelessness, and now was feeling exceedingly disgusted. "As the guilty party, you were actually making your complaints first," he menacingly said. "The Holy Son of Alchemy City may be considered something in the eyes of others, but in my, Shangdi's, eyes, you are but a stinky worm. If you continue to do attention-seeking actions with your ugliness, take care that I will be cruel and merciless." He really had not exaggerated. Alchemy City could only just barely be considered a 5-star force, and only those like the Thundercloud Palace and Zihei clan were willing to give them face. Once it had risen to a 2nd Heaven or 3rd Heaven Celestial King tier level force, what was a mere Alchemy City worth? So what if alchemists had outstanding status? They could all be captured, and forced to concoct alchemical pills. Just see how many alchemists would actually have the backbone to refuse. You are really too unconscientious. It's not enough that you grope another's feet as a man, you even spout threats of wanting to kill others to keep the secret from leaking to hide your own ugly actions. You truly are exceptionally shameless, Ling Han said carelessly. Shangdi couldn't help but fly into a thunderous fury, stretching out his hand to grab at Ling Han. "You are seeking death." Chapter 1912 How could you possibly be an alchemist? Chapter 1912 How could you possibly be an alchemist? Shangdi was a holy son of White Sun sect. Though he wasn't outstanding or unique as Yang Xianlu, the fact that he managed to become the holy son of a 6th Heaven Celestial King tier level sect meant that his natural talent in cultivation naturally could not be doubted. If he really had any weaknesses, then he was just a little bit of a Casanova, but what man was not a Casanova? He moved in fury. Boom, a fiery flame surged out of his body, turning into multiple immortal beasts. Each immortal beast was formed from patterns of great Tao. In comparison, Zhao Qingfeng was practically trash. Ling Han's figure moved, primarily focusing on evasion, calling out loudly as he did. As a great holy son, it is not enough that you take advantage of others, you want to kill others to keep the secret from leaking. This shout instantly drew the eyes of a great many. Some of them even bore expressions of great disdain. They did not know the heads and tails of the story, but had only seen that Zhong Die had indeed been holding onto Ling Han's feet. This was really a strange fetish. Zhong Die's face immediately flushed red. He knew that those with a little intelligence would not believe rumors. As long as one had a healthy brain, they would know that he, Zhong Die, liked women. How could he possibly grope a man's feet on purpose? But now, with so many eyes looking at him strangely, he could not calm himself no matter how hard he tried. "You damn brat, I am going to kill you," he roared, easily angered by Ling Han. This person, was he really the holy son of the White Sun sect? Everyone looked at Zhong Die, who was repeatedly bellowing angrily, their eyes filled with suspicion. How could a holy son, and one that had not come from an ordinary celestial king tier level force, but from a 6th heaven celestial king tier super powerful force, be so easily angered? Heavens, how could this kind of person possibly become a holy son? How could they possibly know that Ling Han's mouth could even drive a celestial king to fume with rage, what more a holy son? However, everyone soon showed expressions of shock. This time, it was not because of Zhong Die, but rather Ling Han. This young man was very strong. Though he had been dodging all this while, it had to be known that being capable of dodging and not countering at all, and still managing to ensure he himself was completely unharmed, was something whose difficulty level far surpassed merely parrying an opponent's blows. Which also meant that Ling Han's true strength was definitely not inferior to Zhong Die's, and had even surpassed his. Heavens! How could this be? Very soon, they recognized him. Ling Han was the holy son that had been selected this time from Alchemy City, but what kind of place of Alchemy City? Setting aside the fact that it was just a 4-star force, even if it was a 1st heaven celestial king tier level sect, how could it possibly compare to the White Sun sect? Moreover, shouldn't the holy son of Alchemy City be an alchemist? They had thought that Yang Xianlu only prized Ling Han's natural talent in alchemy. This was not strange. Yang Xianlu had not advanced to the celestial king tier yet, and had use of Ling Han. However, only now did they know that it turned out that Ling Han's strength in cultivation was also astonishingly strong, capable of being their equal, or even stronger than that. They could not accept this. They were a group that were born prodigies in cultivation, and actually could not compare to an alchemist. Fuck. At this moment, they were more united than ever before. They all hoped that Zhong Die could defeat Ling Han. Otherwise, they would also feel ashamed. However, no matter what kind of celestial techniques Zhong Die used, he could do nothing to Ling Han, and what depressed him even further was the fact that while he and Ling Han had already exchanged almost 100 moves, the truth was there had yet to be solid contact even once between the two of them, aside from the very beginning, when he had accidentally gripped Ling Han's feet. P2E, P2E, P2E. Do you just know how to dodge and hide? Zhong Die tried to provoke him. You're as cowardly as a mouse, I really have no idea why you are even cultivating. In any case, it is not for the sake of groping men's feet, Ling Han retorted smilingly. When Zhong Die heard this, his fury immediately rose up again. You still dare say it, you still dare to say it, I will kill you. In his hands, multiple celestial techniques were channeled, changing into the channeling of Great Tao. He was indeed deserving of being an heir that a 6th heaven celestial king tier level sect had focused on nurturing. If Zhao Qingfeng had exchanged blows with him, the former would definitely have fallen into a disadvantage within 100 moves. If it had been a duel to the death, he would definitely have died within 1,000 moves. In simpler words, his battle prowess was about the same as the Empress. Too bad, the person he had encountered was Ling Han. Even if Yang Xianlu suppressed his cultivation level to the 4th severance, it would be still undecided who would win in a clash with Ling Han. Yang Xianlu had been born on the celestial path, and this was indeed very awesome. However, Ling Han was not ordinary, either. He had 2 source powers of heaven and earth, and also had an amazing technique that was at least at the 9th heaven celestial king tier's level, like the indestructible heavens scroll, and finally, he had been tempered by celestial king tier flames, making up for the final shortcoming of his physique. He was completely not inferior in any way to the highest grade holy son. Zhong Die was already not enough. Ling Han sighed. He initially only wanted to use Shang Da to temper himself, but the height that he was standing at presently was a little frightening. Even the air that had been nurtured by a sixth heaven celestial king tier sect could not give him the slightest bit of pressure. Little Dada, you are a little weak. He was speaking honestly. If the other's strength was close to his, then the two of them could engage in a brilliant battle with their full efforts. Who knew, it might help him to push open the doors to the fifth severance. Shang Da was stomping mad with fury. This guy actually dared to mock him. He really didn't know what the word death meant. You asked for this. His right hand shook, and a silver spear about 3 meters long appeared in his hands. Immediately, a murderous aura rippled out, which was very terrifying. Ling Han's expression also changed slightly. He could sense that this spear had the ability to wound him. The precious spear might be at the dividing soul tier's level. Even in the hands of a fourth severance, it could not unleash its full might, but it was still incredibly sharp, and could pose a threat to even his physique. Quite interesting. Ling Han was interested now, his eyes shining. It's not just interesting, it's going to send you on your way. Shang Da was completely unreserved. So what if he was the holy son of Alchemy City? If he was killed, he was killed. He did not believe that Alchemy City would dare charge to the White Sun sect and demand an explanation. That would only be seeking their own humiliation. Shua, the silver spear flourished like a silver dragon, and it shook the skies. One by one, patterns of great Tao on the spear's body danced, tearing rips into space itself. This definitely was not a pseudo-celestial tool that was Yang Soul or Yin Soul in level, but rather something even stronger than that. It was fine even if Shang Da could not unleash the full might of the pseudo-celestial tool. The grade of this spear itself was too high. If one was even touched by the patterns on it, even one with Ling Han's physique would just barely be able to withstand it. Having lacerations would only be a matter of course. Though Ling Han was not afraid of the other's strength, he did not dare underestimate this pseudo-celestial tool. Immediately, he, too, drew the divine demon's sword, slashing out at the silver spear. Wang. The two precious tools clashed, releasing a thunderous sound that was strong enough to shake the galaxy. The rocks around all floated about 3 meters in the air, and then rapidly turned against the power of gravity to shoot at the skies, gathering into a black and dense tornado. Shang Da's whole person was also sent flying. The silver spear in his hands was extremely frightening, but his own strength was greatly inferior to Ling Han's. In a head-on confrontation, it was naturally impossible that he could be a match for the other party. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression shifted. Though they had guessed that Ling Han's strength could possibly be even stronger, they could ultimately only believe it now that they had witnessed it with their own eyes. Fuck, how could he possibly be an alchemist? Chapter 1913, Duplicate of Heaven and Earth. Chapter 1913, Duplicate of Heaven and Earth. Ling Han looked at Shang Da that had been sent flying, yet put away the divine demon sword. He did not have the time to linger and waste his time on the latter. He had to ascend to the summit as soon as possible. Only the person that reached it first could gain the great fortune from heaven and earth. Let's go. The Empress nodded, and bewitching Maiden Ru put on a pitiful appearance, casting a pleading look at Ling Han. Ling Han sighed internally. He clearly knew that having too much contact with bewitching Maiden Ru was not a good thing, but the charm technique that this bewitching maiden cultivated was really something. It affected him subconsciously, causing him to accept this person more and more. Not because he had designs on her, but rather already taking her as his friend. Moreover, if he abandoned bewitching Maiden Ru here, she would be easily devoured by others. Would a mere 3-star force be enough to intimidate these heirs from Celestial King tier sects? If this kind of thing spread out, it was guaranteed that a great many people would turn around and say that it was bewitching Maiden Ru that was claiming a connection with those above her station. If they wanted beautiful women, wouldn't it be a piece of cake? He stretched out a hand and pressed down, taking bewitching Maiden Ru into his spatial god tool. Of course, it could not possibly be the Black Tower. His trust in this bewitching maiden was far from reaching that level yet. Ling Han and the Empress walked side by side. The others stared at his back for a while, and then set off as well. Some did not make a move, because they did not have enough confidence. Even if they did make a move, that would only be asking for their own humiliation. Others, meanwhile, were in a hurry. After all, Ling Han was extremely powerful. Defeating him would need a very long time, perhaps even a year or more, and they would really be too late by then. The higher they went, the more frightening the aura undulating on this peak was. It was not strong enough that made it difficult for them to even take a single step, but it was still incredibly hard to take a step. Their foreheads were streaming with sweat. Both Ling Han's and the Empress's speed was too low, far from being capable of comparing to that of Yang Xianlu and his group. Going by the look of things now, to say nothing of getting the first prize, they might not even be able to get any consolation prize. But what could they do? They were not at the fifth severance, and were a whole cultivation level lower than Yang Xianlu and his group. Furthermore, this was an incredibly crucial level at that. The others were severing mundane tiers, yet possessed the battle prowess of the dividing soul tier. This was too astonishing. Ling Han turned to the Empress, and said, "Going by this rate, there is definitely no way we can catch up to those three in front." The Empress nodded. "Unless we can break through to the fifth severance, the pressure here is strong enough. Perhaps we can find the trigger to breaking through here. If that is the case, then that would in fact be the greatest fortune for us." The two of them exchanged a look, both breaking into a smile. Right. In front of the fifth severance, what greater fortune could there be? Ling Han had a slightly easier time than the Empress, but for the sake of the Empress's future, he did not think of taking the Empress into the Black Tower. Instead, she used her full effort to resist the terrifying aura on the peak, climbing the mountain one step at a time. This was the Broken Clouds Mountains. They were so tall that they could block the clouds. Though Three Yang Peak was not the tallest summit here, its height was still enough to make one flinch. 1 day, 2 days, 10 days, a month. They had actually walked a whole month on the mountain. Even though they were not walking very fast, after so many days, they could no longer see the foot of the peak since a long time ago. The only thing remaining in sight was drifting clouds, and if they looked higher, they still could not see where the summit was. This peak was really too high. Ling Han and the Empress did not know if Yang Xianlu and his group had reached the summit. However, under the pressure of this aura, it was as if they were constantly exchanging blows with a frightening opponent. The barrier in their bodies was becoming clearer and clearer. The fifth severance. They could already see hopes of the fifth severance. It was close at hand, as if they could touch it just by reaching out. But if they really did stretch out their hand to reach for it, it would seem to be far upon the horizon, and they still could not touch it. This kind of feeling drove them very crazy. Is it that we haven't been tempered enough, or should we refine the heavenly Tao Jade? The Empress asked. Ling Han did not know, either. To say nothing of the fact that they did not have any experience of breaking through to the fifth severance, there was none among those that they had come into contact that had the experience, either. They were completely unable to ask for experience from others. Yang Xianlu? Lao Song? Shan Jitong? Wasn't that a joke? To say nothing of the fact that there was completely no trace of them now, even if they were here, how could Ling Han bring himself to ask? Even if he did, would they even answer? In Celestial King tier sects of 6th heaven and above, there would be 1 or 2 people that broke through to the 5th severance every epoch. Then, Yang Xianlu and the others would have some that could offer them guidance, so they would take a few less wrong turns. Most importantly, neither Ling Han nor the Empress were sure that they could attempt to break through to the 5th severance in this situation. Let's not refine the heavenly Tao Jade first. Just wait and see. Ling Han considered for a moment, and thought that it was impossible to break through to the 5th severance so easily. The Empress nodded in reply. The two of them continued on their way, and not long after, they saw fog twist and turn, turning into some kind of shape. At first, this was very normal. The altitude here was too high, and there were clouds everywhere, but now the fog had actually taken the form of a human figure. Furthermore, it was getting clearer and clearer. Not only were his features clearly seen, his body was filling out as well. In the time for just a single breath, this human figure had completely taken form. If Ling Han and the Empress had not seen this kind of change with their own eyes, they would have definitely been unable to tell that this figure was actually formed from fog. This was a man. He was very young, and his head of black hair hung loosely. There was a kind of coarse and wild air about him. His pride soared, the light in his eyes astonishing. If one looked closely, there was actually a cross pattern in the depths of his pupils. Sword demon race, the Empress suddenly declared. What sword demon race? Ling Han asked. My bloodline memory has information about this race, the Empress explained. This is a frightening race. They do not have a large number, but every single member is incredibly talented, and a considerable number of celestial kings have come from this race. A considerable number of celestial kings. In this race, every member is an expert swordsman. Once they deliver a sword strike, any existence would be sliced into quarters. This is regulations of the supreme level. While the two of them were talking, this young man had already walked over to Ling Han and the Empress. He opened his mouth and said, Yi Wushang, you have been named as one of the top 10 prodigies of the Eastern Celestial Realm, and rank 8th. I, Ji Fei, have deliberately come to ask for guidance. What's going on? Ling Han looked at the Empress, and the Empress also looked at Ling Han. Who was this Ji Fei talking to? Yi Wushang? Neither of them were named Yi Wushang. Yi Wushang, you rank 8th among the top 10 prodigies. Be careful that this will not become a curse, and you will only remain an 8th heaven celestial king in your whole lifetime. Ji Fei continued. Come on then, you claim that eternal prosperity, and this for me is a taboo. Both Ling Han's and the Empress's heart jolted, and then realization dawned on them. Yi Wushang was the eternal prosperity celestial king. This was where the eternal prosperity celestial king had achieved Tao. An epoch ago, the eternal prosperity celestial king had comprehended Tao here, and broken through to celestial king tier. All the opponents he had encountered on his whole way here had been duplicated, and he had reviewed his life of battle. When a celestial king achieved Tao, it had drawn a mysterious response from the heaven and earth, which had thus duplicated these memories. After an epoch, a bizarre event was birthed once more from the heaven and earth, and thus came Ji Fei's revival, showing again the scene when he issued a challenge all those years ago. Ji Fei was clearly a character from an epoch ago. Perhaps he had long since died, or perhaps he had already become a celestial king, and was immortal, but the Ji Fei now was the Ji Fei of Yi Wushang's memories. Come and fight me, Ji Fei declared loudly. When he shouted these words, another clump of clouds gathered again, turning once more into a human figure. However, it was not Ji Fei, but rather a valiant and formidable-looking man. Yi Wushang, I, Zhong Yun, challenge you. Chapter 1914, Niu is here again. Chapter 1914, Niu is here again. Ling Han looked at the Empress, and smilingly asked, we take one each. All right. The Empress nodded. Ling Han faced Ji Fei, while the Empress faced Zhong Yun. The two manifestations immediately launched an offensive. Boom, celestial techniques surged out, incredibly frightening. These two manifestations were not that strong. They were both ordinary Emperor tier level, and Ling Han and the Empress should be able to suppress them easily. However, the environment here was unique, so Ling Han and the Empress still had to endure such frightening pressure. Meanwhile, the two manifestations were formed by the environment here in the first place, so they would naturally not be affected at all. In this way, the couple was a little strained. After fighting for a very long time, the pair finally defeated them. The manifestations immediately turned back into fog, and dispersed on the mountain. People that the eternal prosperity celestial king thought worth remembering do indeed have some strength, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded. Going by the usual trend, the closer they were to the finish line, the stronger their opponents would certainly be. From the beginning, they had already faced two Emperor tiers, and added with the violent pressure of this place, how were they supposed to manage the rest of the way? Since this was where the eternal prosperity celestial king had achieved Tao, then among the opponents that he had encountered on his whole way here, there would definitely be dividing soul tier, immortal palace tier, and ascending origin tier elites. Only one of these existences had to appear, and Ling Han and the Empress could only fall back in defeat. Going by that reasoning, even fifth severance could only feel powerless and incompetent. How could they possibly reach the summit? This kind of thing would definitely not happen. Otherwise, the eternal prosperity celestial king would not have Yang Xianlu come here, Ling Han immediately said. When we reach the summit, we will naturally find out. The Empress's confidence was not affected. However, the eternal prosperity celestial king really does seem to have been cursed. In this whole epoch, he is still an eighth heaven celestial king. It's probably just a coincidence, maybe. The two of them continued onward, but they had not walked too far when fog entwined, and another change took place. Yi Wushang, I, Shong Dong, have come for a battle. I, Dong Ziki, have come to ask for some guidance. The fog manifested into two tall and formidable-looking men who were exuding a brightness that surged skywards. The battle immediately commenced. Ling Han and the Empress still picked one opponent each. This time, they spent an even longer time to defeat the two of them. They exchanged a look, both nodding their heads. As expected, the opponents were getting stronger and stronger. This was also very logical. Opponents of the same cultivation level had been defeated by the eternal prosperity celestial king, so how could they possibly all be remembered? Therefore, each of the opponents here would be stronger than the last. This was very normal. It was definitely severing mundane tiers that numbered the most in the world. Thus, the chances of meeting the most excellent among them would be limited, but after advancing into the dividing soul tier, the whole circle would abruptly shrink greatly, and the situation would be different. And then onwards to the immortal palace tier and ascending origin tier, and the number of prodigies would be decreasing drastically, each more outstanding than the last. The two of them set off, and not long after, two opponents appeared once more ahead of them. There was only one thing left to do, and that was battle. Ling Han and the Empress practically did not stop at all, and battled all the way on their journey. They could feel that some kind of change was taking place inside them, like something in their bodies was improving to another level. 2 months, 3 months, 5 months. Time slowly crept by. The aura here did not change much, such as suddenly becoming so incredibly terrifying that severing mundane tiers were not worthy of even taking another step forwards. And this extensive time had also far exceeded Ling Han and the Empress's expectations. It should also have exceeded everyone else's expectations. Half a year had passed, and they actually still hadn't managed to climb up to the summit of a mountain peak. This was not because Three Yang Peak was too tall, but rather because their whole journey was not peaceful at all. They were endlessly battling and battling. The only benefit was that whatever opponent appeared, they were all only in the severing mundane tier. This should have been deliberately planned out. Going by logic, it is impossible that the eternal prosperity king had only exchanged blows with severing mundane tiers. We are in the severing mundane tier, so our opponents are also only severing mundane tiers. Furthermore, they are all in the range of the fourth severance, but each is stronger than the last. Going by this trend, it really is possible that a fifth severance opponent would appear. I am really quite expectant. The two of them had forgotten the so-called great fortune at the summit. If they could break through to the fifth severance, this would be the most crucial step of their lifetimes, signifying that they advanced into the level of monarch tier. Otherwise, there would still be a great gap between them and top-grade prodigies. Then just continue battling. In another place, Peng, Yang Xianlu defeated his opponent with a single punch. It turned back into fog. His expression was calm and filled with confidence. That was the self-confidence and calmness that he was born with. He knew more than the others about the situation here, and furthermore, he was sure that he definitely would be the first person to reach the summit. He said that he had no fear of contest, and this was indeed one of the reasons. He was confident that he was invincible among his peers. However, the greatest fortune would appear once in an epoch on Three Yang Peak, so he had to fight and compete with a great many top-grade prodigies, and the path of achieving Tao of the eternal prosperity celestial king would make a reappearance. Defeating all the prodigies in the world, stepping on the heads of prodigies to reach the apex. Only in this way would he draw a resonance from the heaven and earth, and gain a great fortune. It was not increasing one's cultivation level, but effecting a change from the essence. For example, He himself was celestial Tao physique, born with an affinity with Tao. He could learn any celestial technique upon his first attempt, but as long as it was not the genuine great Tao, there would be space for improvement. He wanted to use this kind of great fortune to improve his physique so that it was closer to great Tao. In this way, only would he be worthy of contesting with those several heaven-defying freaks. If someone knew Yang Xianlu's thoughts, they would definitely feel very shocked. For Yang Xianlu to call someone a heaven-defying freak, what kind of world-shaking character did this have to be? On the other side, though Larosong and Shan Jitong were also unmatched on their whole way here, they did not know the detailed situation of this place, nor did they know if the other two monarchs had been the first to arrive at the summit, so it was inevitable that they would feel slightly anxious. The person they were the most worried about was naturally Yang Xianlu. This person was called King of the Celestial Path. This was a supreme compliment. To contest with this kind of person, by nature, they would be slightly inferior. At the foot of the mountain peak. Ha 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 ha. Amidst a bout of loud laughter, a young girl leaped down from a dragon hawk. Placing her hands at the sides of her mouth, she loudly called out, "Ling Han, Niu is here. Young Imperial Empress, don't be so loud." There was a middle-aged woman by her side, and she hurriedly moved to stop her. This naturally was Hu Niu. She placed her hands at her hips, and complained, "You're so noisy. So noisy. From day to night, it is always you can't do this, you can't do that. Then Niu doesn't want to be any stupid Imperial Empress, either. Come on, then, I'll hand it back to you." The middle-aged Empress couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. This young Imperial Empress really could not let anyone rest at ease. Why was there no one that could restrain her? Young Imperial Empress, Ling Han has already been dragged into an ascending origin tier great battle. Since he was pulled into the conflict, he would definitely be unable to survive, she advised. This Ling Han should only be someone sharing the same name. It would be better for us to hurry on back to Rock Palace to avoid any side issues from arising. No. No. Hu Niu shook her head frantically. If you want to go back on your own. I don't want to. Furthermore, you short-sighted people have completely no idea how powerful Niu's Ling Han is. He won't die. Young Imperial Empress. Wang. An unknown aura undulated, creating multiple ripples in the air. A myriad of colors actually surged in the skies, as if they were elated and excited. The beautiful middle-aged woman immediately showed a solemn expression, and directed a question at the skies. Since the Eternal Prosperity King is here, why do you not show yourself? Chapter 1915, apparently right but actually wrong. Chapter 1915, apparently right but actually wrong. A strange warping appeared in the air, and then a man was seen stepping out of thin air. He was dressed in black robes, and looked to be only in his 20s. His complexion was as fair as jade, his eyes incredibly soft, giving comfort to anyone who saw him. There seemed to be nothing exceptional about this kind of person, aside from the fact that he looked a little handsome and more refined. So he was the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King? You are Lu Herong, right? The man in black robes asked, showing a nostalgic expression. The little girl that had been at the side of Fairy Iyun years ago. I have not thought that you were already a fourth heaven celestial king by now. This person was indeed the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King. Otherwise, how could he possibly speak such boastful words? The middle-aged woman, Lu Herong, curtsied slightly towards the man in black robes, and said, Lu Herong pays respectful greetings to Lord Eternal Prosperity. There were 9 heavens in the Celestial King tier, and each level brought one closer to ascending the heavens. Even though she was already a 4th heaven Celestial King, she was still very far away from reaching the level of the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King. Naturally, she could only consider herself as his junior. Furthermore, the generation of the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King was indeed considerably older than hers. However, this was only a sliver of divine sense of the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King. It was unknown where his real body was. Lu Herong could still confirm this fact. The Eternal Prosperity Celestial King waved her off, indicating that she needed not be overly courteous. Then, he turned to look at Hu Niu, and said, Is this leaning cloud celestial king's reincarnation? Yi, that's not right. He set his eyes on Hunyo, his eyes exuding an astonishing brightness. Hunyo was displeased now, and said, Uncle, don't you know that it is very impolite to look at others like that? The eternal prosperity celestial king faltered, and then laughed loudly. Shaking his head, he said, No, no, you are indeed not Iyun. You only possess her natural talent and martial imprint, but the two of you are definitely two different people. Looks like it was true that Iyun had been killed in an ambush. He appeared to feel that it was a great pity. Fairy Iyun was exquisite, beautiful, and supremely graceful. What celestial king would not willingly submit to her? It is such a pity that the heavens were jealous of her beauty, envious of her exquisiteness. Hunyo mumbled, Damn uncle, you want to be an old cow that eats young grass. With how sharp the eternal prosperity celestial king's hearing was, this naturally could be heard clearly. Involuntarily, his expression became strange. Though Hunyo possessed a great many traits of the leaning cloud celestial king, and was also world-shakingly beautiful, she had a completely different style than the leaning cloud celestial king. To Iyun, he was filled with adoration, but to Hunyo, he only felt the doting that a senior would feel towards a junior, and not the slightest inappropriate thought rose up in him. The leaning cloud celestial king of the past had enchanted practically all male celestial kings, and the eternal prosperity celestial king was also one of them. Now, when he looked at Hunyo, he had turned this adoration into doting indulgence, seeing Hunyo as his own child. It can't be that you have come to crash the party, right? The eternal prosperity celestial king asked smilingly. In front of Hunyo, he was also less severe, and actually began to joke around. How could we dare to? Lu Herong hurriedly asserted. This junior is only here to accompany young imperial empress. How could I possibly dare offend my lord's great might? The other could joke around, but she could not. This was the difference between one in a high-ranking position and one that was in a lower rank. The eternal prosperity celestial king smiled, and said, This peak is where I achieved Tao. An epoch has passed, and heaven and earth has resonated. There is considerable fortune to be had here. This little girl can go and give it a try, and you can just wait here. As you command, Lu Herong answered respectfully. He was an eighth heaven celestial king, and there was only one person in the rock palace that could intimidate him. Furthermore, Grand Elder was bearing Tao injury. A full-out battle would definitely affect her injuries. In fact, it was even possible for her to die after a battle. Aside from this, there was no other elite that was 8th Heaven Celestial King tier level in the Rock Palace. Go on. The Eternal Prosperity Celestial King waved Hunyo onwards. Who needs you to be so noisy? Hunyo pouted, and headed towards the summit. Ling Han, Ling Han, Ling Han. She was laughing loudly as she ran up the mountain. Again, a great many years had passed since their last meeting, and she missed him very much. Though she was the last to appear, and was half a year later than all the others before her, her strength was incredibly frightening. She ran on the mountain like she was running on flat land. The Eternal Prosperity Celestial King watched her from behind, and couldn't help but show a gratified expression. As expected of the one who has inherited Iyun's natural talent. In a battle of equals, there should be only less than 10 that can defeat her. Immediately, Lu Herong looked defiant. This was an unconventional reincarnation of the previous Imperial Empress, and she was actually still unable to be invincible among her peers. And she had yet to advance into the Celestial King tier. Those that Hunyo could encounter would only be prodigies of the present generation, and there were still about 10 people that were stronger than her. How could this be believed? Going by that account, when Hunyo became a 9th Heaven Celestial King, wouldn't there be countless people that were stronger than her? It had to be known that the true greatest prodigies in history would definitely all have advanced into 9th Heaven Celestial King tier, or practically would not die. As long as they existed for a long enough time in the celestial realm, this number would be astonishingly great. Hee. The Eternal Prosperity Celestial King merely laughed faintly, but did not argue with Lu Herong. In his eyes, she was only a junior. There was really no need for him to argue with someone that was less knowledgeable. Zhong Ya, a prodigy that had just recently risen up. Of course, to say newly risen or recently in the celestial realm could very possibly mean within the last 100,000 years, or even the last 1,000,000 years. Zhong Yue had always kept a low profile before the fourth severance, but after breaking through to the fourth severance, he had stunned the masses, and could not be stopped once he had started. If that had not been the case, he would not have been worthy of being invited by Yang Xianlu. He was panting slightly. All the opponents he had encountered on his journey were incredibly strong, and could only be defeated when he had used his full efforts. He had no choice but to stop to rest and recover his vitality. Otherwise, if he was not in his prime condition, it would not be possible for him to defeat his next opponent. There was a smile on his face. He was confident that his present speed had definitely surpassed the majority. On their way here, they had all separated, and the mountain was entwined in clouds and fog, blocking vision and divine sense. There was no way to see any trace of the others at all. As a prodigy, he naturally had soaring confidence. He rested for a while, and when he felt he had rested just about enough, he stood up. However, just when he was thinking of setting off, he paused slightly. He discovered that some kind of commotion was coming from behind him. As a qualified elite, he immediately turned around, standing in a defensive position. Someone was actually charging up from behind him. Who was it? Zhong Yue was internally stunned. With his kind of speed, someone actually still managed to catch up to him. This was simply unfathomable. He wanted to see who it was, and then battle him. This was possibly the first strongest opponent that would be contesting with him. Out of the way! Out of the way! Amidst a feminine demand, a figure appeared from behind him. This was a world-shakingly beautiful young girl. Her hair was glossy and black, and floated around her like a cloud. Zhong Yue's expression immediately changed greatly, looking as if he had seen a ghost. It was not that he had been stunned by the young girl's exquisite beauty, though she was indeed so beautiful that it did not seem real. More importantly, there was actually a huge group of people behind her that were pursuing her. He was familiar with all these people because every single one of them were memory manifestations that he had battled with for a very long time. All of them had astonishing battle prowess. He had expended a lot of effort to deal with them. For this kind of opponent, he would be in deep trouble if two appeared at the same time, what more when there was a whole group of them now. This young girl, was she seeking death? Peng! Peng! The young girl only used her bare fists, but she was still incredibly fierce and powerful. One punch, and one of the memory manifestations would be blasted back, yet her own speed was practically unaffected as she charged towards Zhong Yue. Boom! Zhong Yue then saw a jade-like fist crashing towards him. It was obviously captivatingly beautiful, but was filled with supreme force. A pattern of great Tao was presently flickering on the surface of the fist, as if a single punch could destroy worlds. I am not a... He was just about to say that he was not a manifestation, but was sent flying by this punch. He really wanted to cry. Chapter 1916, The Formidable Who Knew. Chapter 1916, The Formidable Who Knew. There were definitely a string of curses racing through Zhong Yue's mind. What did he do? Peng, peng, peng. Those memory manifestations all stepped on him as they continued their pursuit. Every stomp caused him to yell out in pain. Fortunately, the aim of these manifestations was the young girl in front of them. Otherwise, each manifestation only had to give him a casual punch, and he would be done for. Ah! Zhong Yue trembled endlessly. Some manifestations were really stepping on inappropriate places, deliberately stepping on his backside. That series of stomps caused him to be in unspeakable agony. His ass had really suffered greatly. Yi, so you are a human being. The young girl in front of him turned her head around, her expression filled with shock. Then, she became irritated. I already told you to get out of the way, and you still stood there like a blockhead. If you had delayed Nyo's time, would you have been able to afford the compensation? Don't let Nyo see you again, or I will beat your head until it burst. After saying this, the young girl ran off without a second thought. Of course, she also brought out even more memory manifestations, forming a majestic army. Zhong Yue. Fuck your sister. Yang Hongyi, the holy son of a 6-star great sect. He had advanced into the fourth severance more than 1 million years ago, and had long since cultivated to the peak stage of the fourth severance. In truth, he was already able to break through to the dividing soul tier, but had not taken this step all this while. That was because he had an even greater ambition. He wanted to become a fifth severance. However, this was too hard to accomplish. After so many years, he did not have the slightest bit of breakthrough, and was still making no headway. He was also one with a strong will, and his determination did not waver. In any case, a celestial had an unlimited lifespan. As long as the immortal's tribulation had not reached an extent that he could not survive, there was absolutely no need for him to rush to break through. The difference between the fourth severance and the fifth severance was really too huge. Without advancing into this cultivation level, he would only be an emperor tier, and have no hopes of becoming a top-notch prodigy. It could be said that whatever minor flaws you encountered in your cultivation, such as not fully stabilizing your cultivation level, this was all fine. After you reached Celestial King tier, you would have more than enough time to restabilize, but for the fifth severance, there would only be this one chance now. He believed that this was a chance that the heavens had bestowed on him. He was determined to become the first person to reach the summit and obtain a great fortune, taking that opportunity to push open the doors to the fifth severance. Peng. Under such pressure and motivation, he had completed his own improvement. Inconceivably, his battle prowess had increased greatly, and he had defeated another memory manifestation. I have accomplished much, but there is still more to do. With my present battle prowess, I should be invincible in the severing mundane tier, he muttered to himself proudly. The enemies here are all adjusted according to one's cultivation level, so I do not have the slightest bit of disadvantage. Yang Xianlu, Laro Song, Shan Jitong, just all of you wait. In the future, among those that can shake the world, and cause the celestial realm to quiver with just a single step, I will definitely be present. Peng. 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 The ground suddenly began to quiver. At first, it was a very light tremble, but it very soon was as if an earthquake was happening. What was going on here? Though he had previously said that he wanted to make the world quiver with a single step, the problem here was that, firstly, he had not become this kind of powerful figure yet, and secondly, he had not raised his foot at all, right? Out of the way! Out of the way! A feminine exclamation rang out, and a beautiful figure could be seen charging over from below. So beautiful! Yang Hongyi instantly looked stunned, but in the next second, this kind of stunned expression became a panicked expression, or, in fact, even horrified. Fuck, what was going on with the huge crowd of figures following behind the young girl? Those were all memory manifestations of a celestial king. Have you gone mad? You actually did not fight your way up one step at a time, but have rather drawn out so many all at once. Do you want to die? Hiss, if you want to die, you cannot drag others in as well, fuck. He had not even finished this thought when he saw that the young girl was already about to reach him. He was so terrified he hurriedly stepped aside. Peng, peng, peng. After the young girl had rushed over, a huge mass of manifestations also rushed over. However, this just happened to be a narrow mountain path which could only accommodate 3 people to pass through at the same time at most, yet a huge pile of manifestations were completely unconcerned, and rushed forwards all at the same time. Yang Hongyi was immediately in trouble. Having a few dozen manifestations crash into him, he ricocheted back and forth like a marble. Unfortunately, he could not counter. These manifestations were too strong. In a one-on-one battle, he could still manage, but in a battle of 1 against 2, or 1 against 3, he would only be thrashed. If several dozen of them ganged up on him at the same time, he would undoubtedly die. Hence, he definitely could not become the target of these manifestations. Otherwise, that would only be courting death. Hong Long Long, the young girl brought over 100 manifestations and stampeded over, causing dust to fly in all directions. Only then did Yang Hongyi get back up from the ground. He looked in the direction where the young girl had disappeared, his face covered in bruises. They had all been created when the manifestations had rushed past him. Furthermore, unless he could erase the external martial intent from within his body, these wounds would not disperse at all. That definitely was not something that would take a short while. He would have to maintain this appearance of having been pummeled for a very, very long time. Fuck. He raised a middle finger at the young girl's receding back. If the latter came back to stand in front of him, he would definitely come to blows with her. He could not swallow this injustice. Ayo. This raising of his finger immediately pulled on the injuries on his body, and he couldn't help but moan in pain. This was painful. This was really painful. Huang Fu Ling, Wu Kun, Xiao Junren, one after another, prodigies were all surpassed by Hunyou, and they were both shocked and furious. As Hunyou went higher and higher up the mountain peak, the army of manifestations behind her also became bigger and bigger. This number was already no longer in the hundreds, but in the thousands. Too frightening. Every manifestation was a prodigy of their generation, and with so many of them added together, just how terrifying was this party? If Yang Xianlu saw it, he would probably pale in shock too, right? Yet Hunyou was completely unconcerned. She kept calling out Ling Han's name in excitement as she barged all the way through, drawing enough animosity from all directions. The 10th month. Both Ling Han and the Empress were mad from battle. Before this, though they had encountered a great many enemies, there were not that many that could become a match for them. However, in this place, every opponent was a super prodigy, a powerful foe that the eternal prosperity celestial king had encountered on his path to achieving Tao. The success of one was built on the deaths of thousands. For a celestial king to reach the utmost pinnacle, it was naturally inevitable that he would need countless prodigies to become his stepping stones. And now, these stepping stones had been manifested by the Tao of heaven and earth once more, each of them possessing frightening battle prowess. This was practically pulling out all the powerful foes that the eternal prosperity celestial king had encountered throughout his lifetime. Just how many years had they been accumulated for? Just how long had Ling Han and the Empress been alive for? How could they compare to this? To them, the improvement of their cultivation level was too fast, and accumulation of experience was a very massive weakness, but now they had really battled enough. Ling Han felt blood bubbling inside his body as his Tao heart was improving to a new level. His consciousness was becoming ethereal. A set of great doors were about to open, but to speak of truly pushing them open, he was still a little bit away from that level. The heavenly Tao Jade could help him push them open. I am close to breaking through, the Empress said. She had the same feeling as Ling Han. Yen, let's enter into the Black Tower, and refine the heavenly Tao Jade. This kind of chance definitely cannot be missed. Otherwise, who knows when the next time would be, Ling Han declared resolutely, and entered into the Black Tower with the Empress in tow. Only after a while, Hunyou was seen leading a great army racing over majestically. Ling Han! Ling Han! She rushed ahead in excitement. Chapter 1917, Refining the Heavenly Tao Jade, the Fifth Severance close at hand. Chapter 1917, Refining the Heavenly Tao Jade, the Fifth Severance close at hand. Ling Han faltered for a moment. Hunyou. Why had she come? Realization immediately dawned on Ling Han. Commander Guan had to have reported the situation at the time to Hunyou, and said that he had already died. But how could Hunyou be willing to believe that? Thus, she had come personally. What is it? The Empress could not sense what was happening outside the Black Tower. Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, Hunyou is here. Before long, we will be able to meet. It was rare for the Empress to bear a solemn expression. In the past, one of her doppelgangers had seen Hunyou, and she knew just how jealous this little girl could be. She also knew that Hunyou was also exquisitely beautiful, in no way inferior to her. It would be a challenge for her to get Hunyou on her side, and continue to sit on precious seat as the first wife of the Ling clan. But the Empress was filled with confidence. Ling Han took out the heavenly Tao Jade, and created a crack in it. The both of them laid their palms on it at the same time, extracting the essence within. Boom, their bodies suddenly trembled, astonishing multicolored light shooting out of them, and forming multiple seals, each different from the others. 2 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, a day. Ling Han and the Empress had already reached a state of satiation, and could no longer receive the power of the heavenly Tao Jade. Furthermore, They were filled with confidence that they would be able to deliver the fifth severance now. However, the essence of the heavenly Tao Jade was still endlessly spewing out from the crack on the heavenly Tao Jade, as if it would never stop. It could not be sealed off. Ling Han frowned. If things went on like this, wouldn't the heavenly Tao Jade be wasted for nothing? His original plans were perfect. Hunyo came, and he could just hand the remaining heavenly Tao Jade to her, but now he had to attempt to break through to the fifth severance. Otherwise, the essence of the heavenly Tao Jade would rapidly disappear, and he would also miss this opportunity that had formed after 10 months of hard battling. This was something accumulated from having experienced countless battles. To reach this kind of condition next time, he might have to fight more than 10 times, or 100 times the number of opponents. The problem was that this was a chance that would only take place once in an epoch. Under normal conditions, just how long would you need to encounter so many top-notch prodigies? Hence, if he missed this chance, the next time could possibly be 1,000,000 or 10,000,000 years later. Ling Han thought for a moment, exited the Black Tower, and then entered into his spatial god tool. Take it. He tossed out the remaining heavenly Tao Jade, then turned and left, leaving bewitching Maiden Ru in a state of bafflement. His heart was aching. He naturally wanted to save something so precious for his own people, but Hunyo was so energetic, and would have vanished by now. Meanwhile, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had not advanced into the severing mundane tier yet, so she was not capable of refining it at all. Otherwise, that would only be seeking death. He could only benefit this great bewitching maiden. Bewitching Maiden Ru grabbed the heavenly Tao Jade, her expression completely dumbfounded. What do you mean by this? Running after throwing a rock at me? What did I do to you? Why did you throw this rock at me? But in the next instant, she sensed the energy released from the heavenly Tao Jade, and she immediately showed an expression of astonishment. It was simply boundless, as if the heavenly Tao was just in front of her eyes, and could be touched just by stretching out her hand. She hurriedly grabbed hold of the heavenly Tao Jade tightly, sat down in cross-legged position, and began to refine these benefits. Once she was actively drawing on the essence inside the heavenly Tao Jade, she immediately realized what kind of precious treasure this was. All the inadequacies that she had previously encountered in her cultivation were being mended, and she had reached perfection. All her 4 strikes had been struck on herself, but now the mortal bonds that she had severed had all returned, and in their place, there was a more obvious gulf between herself and the heavenly Tao. Was this something bad? No, no, no. She immediately realized that it was not the case. Though there was now a gap between her and heavenly Tao, she instead felt that she had a clearer view of heavenly Tao. That was because if she herself was wrapped within, she would not be able to see clearer, just like onlookers would be able to see more of the game. And now that she had leaped out of the game, she could view it from a wider angle, so it was naturally different. A strong excitement rose up within her. She was presently advancing from the level of King Tier to the level of Emperor Tier. Furthermore, as she was a divine fetus in the first place, after she became an Emperor Tier, her future would be boundless and bright. Ling Han, didn't he dislike her? Why had he given such a precious treasure to her? Could it be that this was a gift to pledge his love? This damn guy, he was actually capable of being embarrassed. Without saying a single word, he wanted to take her for himself. Humph, no way. She had to be even more reserved. Otherwise, Ling Han would think she was a loose woman. She was not a loose woman at all. She had only cultivated charm technique, and she was always all smiles by nature. Ling Han did not know that bewitching Maiden Ru had misunderstood. His heart was still hurting. He had actually thrown such a precious treasure to an outsider. He really wanted a moment of silence. But after he returned to the Black Tower, he immediately began to comprehend Tao underneath the reincarnation tree. He and the Empress had to have absorbed even more essence from the heavenly Tao Jade, erasing all the minor flaws that they had encountered on their way of cultivation so that they had reached a state of perfection. And the majority of energy was pushing the heavenly Tao to channel so that they could glimpse the profound secrets of the fifth severance. Those initially tightly closed great doors were already slightly loosening, and next, it would be up to them to see how they would be able to push open these great doors, and enter into a new threshold from there. After all, The heavenly Tao Jade only granted an additional sliver of possibility of breaking through to the fifth severance. Underneath the reincarnation tree, time flew by. Multiple rays of light exuded from Ling Han's and the Empress's body, intertwining and turning into a massive ball of light. Great Tao was flowing on its surface. As if it was breathing, it drew in, and then extended out. Every time they drew in, there would be a frightening aura flowing. If this was not inside the Black Tower, it was guaranteed that the whole three-young peak would be able to sense this. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. A total of 1,000 years had passed, and Ling Han and the Empress opened their eyes at practically the same time. The ball of light around them suddenly crumbled, and there were actually no whites in their eyes, but rather a galaxy of indescribable depths. An aura that far surpassed fourth severance was exuding from their bodies, yet in essence, it belonged to the severing mundane tier, which was incredibly mysterious. The fifth severance. No, they had not delivered this strike. They were still a little bit away from this step. They had to endure the heavenly tribulation, and only then would they be able to deliver this strike at the heavens so that they would advance into the level of monarch tier. Let's go. The two of them exited the Black Tower at the same time, each then drawing out a green-colored peach tree leaf and placing it on top of their heads. Boom, the heaven and earth roared furiously, two expanses of dark clouds rolling out. You had struck once, twice, thrice, and for the fourth time, and all of the strikes were delivered at the heaven and earth, but after the fourth strike, even while severed, they were still joined by a slight amount. Thus, while the heaven and earth were furious, their fury was limited. This was embodied in the might of the heavenly tribulation. But the fifth severance. Once this strike was delivered, that would mean completely severing their connection with the heaven and earth, as if they had leaped out of the bounds of heaven and earth. This was definitely forbidden. The heaven and earth did not allow it. Hence, the heavenly tribulation rolled out, wanting to use their strongest fury to erase this kind of strange existence. However, the natural peach seal took effect. This kind of source power of heaven and earth could not possibly help a cultivator comprehend Tao and increase his cultivation level. It seemed to be completely useless, yet was able to conceal destiny, decreasing the might of the heavenly tribulation. At this kind of time, there was nothing more useful than the natural peach seal. The two natural peach seals immediately burst out with soaring brilliance, a strange force surging out. It was as if three young peak had been disconnected from the rest of the world, forming an independent world of its own. The scale of the tribulation clouds immediately began to shrink, though. While it had still far surpassed the level of the fourth severance, it could match only the heavenly tribulation for young soul at most. Wasn't the fifth severance equivalent to young soul? Then, wasn't experiencing this kind of heavenly tribulation no big deal? Chapter 1918, Caught Up. Chapter 1918, Caught Up. En. The eternal prosperity celestial king raised his eyes to look at the skies, showing an expression of slight surprise. To say nothing of the fact that his divine sense could reach anywhere and everywhere, even with just a casual look like this, he could immediately discover what was going on. The fifth severance, natural peach seal. These two were always connected together. He had never heard of anyone being capable of enduring the heavenly tribulation of the fifth severance without depending on the natural peach seal. There was definitely none. Even those few old monsters had not been so powerful at the time. Their heirs, too, had no other treasure that they could rely on that could match this kind of massive tribulation. They could only depend on the natural peach seal. Which child of which clan is it that actually possesses this kind of treasure? He appeared to be slightly curious. The natural peach tree was a source power of heaven and earth, but had been felled by a supreme being a certain number of years ago. Now, the natural peach seals that everyone was using had been passed down from very, very long ago, and there were already no new ones. It would mean one less with each use. Being able to see it at this kind of time caused the eternal prosperity celestial king to feel slightly intrigued. Furthermore, this was the fifth severance. Even in a ninth heaven celestial king tier force, there were not many people that could reach this kind of height. Under the banner of every great sect, there would only be one or two such existences in an epoch, probably. But now, there were actually two people breaking through at the same time, and even he, as an eighth heaven celestial king, could not hide his surprise. Lu Herong showed a similar expression of shock. While her strength was inferior to the eternal prosperity celestial kings, the Rock Palace was still a ninth heaven celestial king tier level force, so she was actually more knowledgeable than even the eternal prosperity celestial king. There were also not many left of the natural peach seals in the Rock Palace. Interesting. Truly interesting. The eternal prosperity celestial king's eyes burned, the surprise in his expression even more pronounced. Previously, he had not taken note of Ling Han at all, right until the moment when his attention was attracted by the heavenly tribulation, and then he had taken another look at him. Then, he had discovered the natural peach seal, and consequently, he had seen even more. A celestial king only wished to know something, and there was nothing that they could not find out. Ancestral flame, source water, the eternal prosperity celestial king murmured. Even a celestial king would find it extremely difficult to obtain one of these two types of source powers, yet he possesses two by himself. Could it be that he is? Lu Hairong's beautiful eyes shone. Being reminded thus by the eternal prosperity celestial king, how could she not distinguish this? This was too astonishing. Immediately, a strong urge rose up in her to capture Ling Han, and snatch these two source powers of heaven and earth so she could hand them over to Hunyo to refine. When this thought rose up in her mind, it could no longer be withdrawn. This brat's name is Ling Han, the eternal prosperity celestial king declared with a smile. Ah! Immediately, Lu Hairong's mouth gaped, and she did not know what she could say in this instant. Was this Ling Han the Ling Han that Hunyo was looking for? This was too much of a coincidence, wasn't it? Hunyo was certain that Ling Han had not died. If this young man was really that Ling Han, then it was understandable that he had managed to dodge the aftermath of the attack from an ascending origin tier. Even for source powers, he had two, so how could it be that he did not have other precious treasures on him? Too bad, if that was the case, these two source powers could not be transferred to Hunyo then. Xiao, a figure shot over. This was a grey-haired old geezer. His hair was sparse, his figure stooped, and his face was covered with wrinkles. It looked like he was about to die from old age, his whole person exuding a strong air of decay. The old demon Blood Shadow. Brat, do you think that just because you have quietly run out, I will not be able to catch up to you? How naive. He revealed a cold smirk, yet did not discover the presence of two celestial kings at all. As long as a celestial king was unwilling to let others know of their presence, then whoever stood in front of them, it was the same. They would not be able to discover them at all. In terms of grasp of great Tao, celestial kings had exceeded the ascending origin tier not by just a little bit. Brat, do you think that I can't find you? The old demon Blood Shadow mumbled to himself. Previously, he had been waiting all along outside Alchemy City. Then, he discovered that Ling Han had become a new holy son of Alchemy City. To be honest, when he heard of this news, the expression on his face was incredibly colorful. He told this brat to become Lu Xianming's follower, and assist him in being promoted. Then, he could take advantage of the opportunity to steal the natural peach seal, but this brat actually became a holy son himself. This. The old demon Blood Shadow was extremely dumbfounded. This brat actually knew alchemy as well, and it seemed like his accomplishments in this field were not low, either. Otherwise, how could he possibly be chosen as a holy son by Alchemy City? He immediately recalled how he had discovered something strange about Ling Han previously. It was highly possible that he was hiding some kind of treasure, but at the time, his only consideration was the natural peach seal. Otherwise, if he could not break through to the next cultivation level, then even if he had a lot of treasures, they would all be wasted. In any case, he would kill Ling Han afterwards, so by then, whatever treasure there was, would all belong to him. Yet now, a feeling of regret rose up in him. He had a feeling that he seemed to have made a mistake. Afterwards, when Ling Han was promoted, and became the future chairperson of Alchemy City, the old demon Blood Shadow was directly stunned silly. Something like that was possible? I told you to become someone's subordinate, and help him get promoted, yet you yourself sit in that position. Impressive. For this kind of change in plans, even if others could think of it, How could they possibly accomplish it? After the old demon Blood Shadow was stunned, the only remaining feeling he had left was naturally great elation. Now, he would have a reliable source for the natural peach seal. Furthermore, the treasure that Ling Han possessed would also belong to him soon after. But he waited, and still Ling Han did not come out to meet him, causing this old bastard to become more and more anxious. In the end, he could bear it no longer, and snuck into the city. However, he was soon discovered, and a great battle ensued. Injured, he fled. But he had still caught a few people, and directly plucked out their souls. He discovered that Ling Han had already left Alchemy City, setting out to meet Yang Xianlu at the appointed time. Hence, he immediately rushed over. Though the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King's name was famed for his military prowess, he thought that as long as he did not trifle with this Celestial King, and only kidnapped a minor cultivator, an alchemist, there was definitely no way that he could possibly alert the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King. How could it be that this Celestial King knew Ling Han? There was absolutely no way. Three Yang Peak was a place he could not ascend. This was where a Celestial King had achieved Tao, and now the Eternal Prosperity Celestial King only allowed juniors of the severing mundane tier to contest for this kind of great fortune. It was impossible that anyone else could break through his barrier. Unless their strength was superior to his. But if their strength was superior to his, what need would they have for this kind of great fortune? Lightning flickered, and a broad-shouldered man also appeared quietly. Ba Yao. He had returned to the Thundercloud Palace, and reported Ling Han's situation. Then, he had found some excuse, and came out all by himself again. Naturally, it was because of Ling Han. Coming from a Celestial King tier force, his insight was naturally much better than the old demon Blood Shadow's. He was sure that the treasure that Ling Han possessed was priceless. It was very possible that it was a source power of heaven and earth or the precious treasure of a Celestial King. Thus, he had come alone so that he could snatch this kind of treasure for himself. Who knew, the trigger for him to become a Celestial King himself could be found from Ling Han. The place of achieving Tao of a Celestial King, he looked up at Three Yang Peak, revealing an expression of reverence. The Eternal Prosperity Celestial King was high and noble, and had survived thousands of tribulations. Compared to him, the Thundercloud Celestial King was as insignificant as an ant, not even being worthy of picking up his shoes. Even he dared to imagine reaching such heights himself only in his dreams. This was very normal. His extravagant hope for himself was only to break through to the Celestial King tier himself. When he had been a holy son, he was filled with confidence, thinking that he was definitely capable of succeeding, but as his cultivation level increased, he gradually realized that the height of this difficulty level was like ascending to the heavens. The Celestial King tier was too hard to attain. A great many holy sons and holy daughters had come from the Thundercloud Palace in these billions and billions of years, but how many of them had become a Celestial King? 0. There was no shortage of prodigies even more excellent than him among them, but everyone had failed, so on what basis would he manage to succeed? Whether I can become a Celestial King or not will depend on this. Chapter 1919, The Fifth Severance. Chapter 1919, The Fifth Severance. In the mountains, Ling Han and the Empress were very far from each other as they prepared to greet the coming of the heavenly tribulation. Thankfully, the natural peach seals had taken effect, and concealed their destiny so that the violence of the heavenly tribulation suddenly declined to a weaker level. Though it had still far surpassed the heavenly tribulation for a normal fourth severance, and was in fact close to the heavenly tribulation for the dividing soul tier, this was already within the capacity of tolerance for the both of them. Though neither Ling Han nor the Empress were officially at the fifth severance, their strength was already close to Yang Soul tier. Crack! A sudden clap of thunder rang out, and hundreds of thousands meters long thunderbolts crashed down as if they intended to rip apart the heaven and earth itself. Ling Han faced this calmly. Using the indestructible heaven scroll, he shattered his godly bones to accept being tempered by the heavenly tribulation. This had already become something that he would definitely do every time he endured a heavenly tribulation. The Empress was not as much of a maniac as he was. She only formed 9 doppelgangers, each and every one of them extremely graceful and exquisitely beautiful. With a wave of her delicate hand, they faced the most frightening and mightiest force in this world. Boom, boom, boom. Ling Han was calm and carefree. His strength lay in his strong physique. Even if it was a Yang soul heavenly tribulation he was faced with now, with his present physique, he would only experience a few scrapes at most. If he had not taken the initiative to shatter his own godly bones, he would have been completely capable of lying down and enduring the heavenly tribulation without the slightest issue. The Empress also did not have a very hard time. There were 10 of her to share the pressure. Though she did not have as easy a time as Ling Han, she did not look strained, either. This was the benefit of the natural peach seal, which was capable of fooling heaven and earth. Ling Han couldn't help but think that if there were enough natural peach seals, the number of elites in this world would definitely increase a few times over. This was not an exaggeration. Probably half among 100 people that endured the heavenly tribulation would die, and about half of those that survived would possibly suffer serious injury, and would not be able to advance to a higher cultivation level in their lifetime. At most, only about a quarter could possibly survive the heavenly tribulation. "You're overthinking things," Small Tower piped up, its tone filled with pride. "I don't think I asked for your opinion." Ling Han gritted his teeth. This Small Tower always liked to pour cold water on him. Just what good did doing that have for it? Small Tower ignored him, and continued, "The first use of the natural peach seal has the best effects, but just like continuously taking alchemical pills, the effects would weaken with each consequent use. Do you really think that heaven and earth can be deceived?" Ling Han gave an also that was the case. Even in great sects, the natural peach seal is only used for the heavenly tribulation of the fifth severance. If one had to use the natural peach seal in other heavenly tribulations, then this person would really be too weak. This would practically be a waste. Small Tower declared with contempt. Though the natural peach seal is formed from a source power of heaven and earth, and is capable of assimilating a cultivator to a certain extent so that heaven and earth would consider him as a part of it, and the might of the heavenly tribulation would naturally decrease sharply, it can succeed once, but not continuously. If one continued to use the natural peach seal all the time, he would ultimately be seen through by heaven and earth. Then, all the might of heavenly tribulation from before would be compounded, and furthermore, it would increase more than 10 times over. How could one possibly survive that? Ling Han was struck speechless, and complained uncontrollably. He was only sighing a bit, feeling slightly rueful. Why had Small Tower spouted a whole bunch? Is it really appropriate for you to inject me with so much useless information? I have a feeling that after you advance into the fifth severance, the Black Tower will change greatly. Small Tower's tone suddenly changed, though it had always maintained the kind of tone that could drive one to die with fury. This time Ling Han could feel that there was a slight feeling of anticipation in its tone. Coming from a tool spirit, this was a little inconceivable. Both Ling Han and Small Tower had deliberately avoided the name Tower of Three Realms, and would not speak of it even while communicating through divine sense. Ling Han faltered for a moment, and then asked, "Strange, I haven't advanced into a new cultivation level, so why would there suddenly be change? And a great change at that. The fifth severance, severing the heaven and earth, becoming your sole existence, you yourself are the heaven and earth, and you yourself are the universe," Small Tower said slowly. This time, its tone had returned to normal. Even a great many celestial kings were not able to attain the fifth severance. This is the true first step of advancing into the territory of supremacy. If you couldn't attain the fifth severance, I would leave you when you advanced into the dividing soul tier. That is because you would not be able to bear the mission that I have been bestowed with. This time, Small Tower was very direct with its words, and did not act secretive. All of a sudden, Ling Han did not know what he felt. Being with Small Tower for so many years, he was already accustomed to its existence. To suddenly hear that Small Tower would resolutely leave him, his feelings were complex. Clearly, Small Tower had not truly accepted him as its master in truth. Small Tower had never recognized him as its master. From beginning to end, Small Tower had been constantly carrying out the will of the previous owner of the Black Tower, the owner of the Black Tower, and that was nurturing him. Its motive was very possibly to ensure that he was capable of dealing with a great danger that would come in the future. Even when it came to the right to know what it was, he could only gain it after advancing into the Celestial King tier. If you were incapable, then another would replace you. Perhaps the fact that the Black Tower had appeared in the lower realm was because the Black Tower had abandoned the previous choice. Don't let your imagination run wild, Small Tower said. From beginning to end, you have been the only heir of the Black Tower. With you comforting me like this, I will only feel that you are doing it for show. Ling Han said with a laugh. He had already recovered. Whatever the case, the Black Tower had helped him countless times on his path of growth. It could be said that without the Black Tower, he might have attained massive achievements on the path of alchemy, but in cultivation, he would only be average or even less than that. That was because he had not strengthened his foundations at all, and there had been absolutely no possibility that he could advance to a very high level. Perhaps he would have already been refined by the 5 sects into a realm pill, and long since ceased to exist. Then just let me anticipate the great change of the Black Tower. Ling Han restructured his godly bones. Though the heavenly tribulation had not passed yet, the tempering of his godly bones was already complete. His eyes shone extraordinarily bright, his right hand raised high. He was going to deliver the 5th severance now. Shua, his right hand descended. It was obviously just a strike at empty air, but when this slash fell, a strange light appeared, and then lit up the whole heaven and earth. A roar of fury rang out through the skies and the earth, and it could not be discerned whether it came from human or beast, yet it caused one's heart and spirit to tremble. Clang, when the next bolt of lightning descended, its might had clearly increased considerably. It took the form of a divine spear, intending to erase Ling Han forcefully. Under the 5th severance, even the natural peach seal could no longer fully conceal Ling Han's existence, and he drew a strong backlash from the heavenly Tao. Ling Han had a strange feeling. It was as if he had leaped out of the bounds of this heaven and earth. In the past, he was assimilated within, as if he was just a drop of water in a mighty ocean. He was one of them, but now he had become a fish. Though he was still unable to leave this ocean behind, he could occasionally leap out of the water and look at this world from a different angle. Heavenly Tao was already far from him, but it seemed as if he could grasp it easier even now. An enlightenment rose up in Ling Han. It was no wonder that a 5th severance would definitely become a celestial king, so that was the case. Wang, a light exuded from within his body. It was very gentle, but also very overbearing. This was not celestial light, but blazed even brighter than celestial light. This was something that belonged solely to him. Light of Tao. Severed from the heaven and earth, he was his own individual existence. He was a drop of water in a huge ocean, yet could leap out of this great ocean. When he was strong enough, he himself could become an ocean. Boom, all of a sudden, a strong wave rippled out in his body. The weak light of Tao previously was immediately concealed, replaced by a strong brilliance. Time, space, slaughter. 3 types of supreme regulations rang out loudly in Ling Han's body at the same time, but none could be grasped. The remaining 3 floors of the Black Tower unlocked simultaneously. Chapter 1920 3 floors of the tower unlock simultaneously. Chapter 1920 3 floors of the tower unlock simultaneously. Ling Han had not expected at all that the great change that Small Tower spoke of would actually be so great, either. 3 floors of the tower would open simultaneously. Wang, the Tower of 3 Realms, was floating in his dantian, all 9 floors of the tower shining at the same time, exuding a supreme air that could suppress the heavens and traverse all ages. The eternal prosperity celestial king frowned slightly. Just moments ago, he actually detected a supreme aura, which had far surpassed his cultivation level. 9th heaven celestial king, perhaps even stronger than that. Impossible. His face was filled with shock, and he felt that this was inconceivable. It seemed like all kinds of bizarre and weird occurrences were happening all at the same time. Meanwhile, Lu Hairong's limbs trembled slightly. She had had contact with this kind of aura before. Was it that lord? In the mountains, Ling Han had no time to see how the Black Tower had changed. He raised his fists skywards, greeting the heavenly tribulation that had become even more violent. In truth, he could have delivered this severance a while later. Then, even if the heaven and earth raged in fury, only one divine bolt of lightning would descend at most. In fact, it could be directly avoided. Yet Ling Han wanted to try it out to see exactly just how frightening this heavenly tribulation could be. He was going to set foot on the pinnacle of cultivation, and had to surpass all other prodigies. Thus, he would have to defeat some opponents that other prodigies thought could not possibly be defeated. Moreover, he still had the natural peach seal to suppress it somewhat. If he still couldn't endure this kind of heavenly tribulation, he would really be too weak. Peng. He confronted the heavenly tribulation. In only a single clash, he felt that his arm was slightly numbed. This caused him to feel slight shock. It should be known that his physique was very strong, and even Yin Soul elites would find it very difficult to injure him. Yet now, his arm was already numb from a single strike. However, this was invigorating. A frightening power surged in Ling Han's body. This was a mysterious change that had taken place in his dantian after he had successfully opened the sky. No longer did he have to absorb spiritual qi from the heaven and earth and convert it into his origin power. He himself had become a universe of his own. In the past, he had formed millions of stars, but those were just mere symbols, and could only be used to store origin power. It was a different case now. These stars had turned into genuine, real stars, endless power feeding back into him. It was no wonder that the fifth severance was so strong, being capable of matching Yang Soul elites. This was a completely new cultivation level. His power could shatter the heavens. Ling Han released a battle cry, and battled fiercely with the lightning. He sent out a barrage of punches, and the source power that was formed from the nine heavens flame and Shenyin source water was wrapped around his fists, forming multiple seals of great Tao, and they were also strengthening in this process. Source powers of heaven and earth were destined to be capable of reaching celestial king tier, but it was not determined whether it would be first heaven, second heaven, or eighth heaven, ninth heaven. Thus, Ling Han wanted to endlessly temper them. On the other side, the Empress's heavenly tribulation was also nearing its end. She did what she could, and did not deliver the fifth severance too early. Instead, she waited until after the final divine bolt of lightning had landed to finally deliver the fifth severance. In this manner, though the heaven and earth were still raging in fury, nothing could be done to her. Since both of them were experiencing the heavenly tribulation at the same time, with the conclusion of the Empress's heavenly tribulation, Ling Han's naturally ended as well. The two expanses of tribulation clouds seemed to disperse at practically the same time too. Ling Han and the Empress exchanged a look, both revealing a smile of satisfaction. The fifth severance. From this moment onwards, they had finally advanced into the ranks of top-tier prodigies, no longer allowing Yang Xianlu, Shan Jitong, and others to simply shine ahead of them. Brat, don't be too proud. Even in the fifth severance, there is similarly a difference in strength, Small Tower warned. Ling Han nodded. Just take Yang Xianlu, Shan Jitong, and Larosong as examples. It was clearly Yang Xianlu that was the strongest of the three, and perhaps he was not just a little bit stronger than the other two. Shan Jitong and Larosong would have to join forces to be able to match him. Becoming a fifth severance was only taking a step over the doorstep. However far they could go would still have to depend on their efforts. It was not something that could be done once and for all. Cultivation always meant going against the flow. If one did not improve, that would mean that he was falling back. What about the Black Tower? With 3 floors unlocking at the same time, what changes have taken place? Ling Han asked. You can use time acceleration effects, Small Tower said. The effect of catalyzing the growth of celestial medicine has improved to 100 times, and if it is limited to just a small area, it can reach 1,000 times. Ling Han was initially surprised, which was followed by his great joy, and he said, which also means that if I concoct alchemical pills inside the Black Tower, the speed can be accelerated 1,000-fold. That's right. Small Tower nodded. Ling Han couldn't help but break into a smile. If it was comprehension, it was the reincarnation tree that was still better. However, that was only mental and spiritual acceleration. If the physical body was factored in, it would definitely be the acceleration effects of the Black Tower that were more amazing. Additionally, you can also comprehend the regulation of time, regulation of slaughter, and regulations of space, Small Tower continued. This was too awesome. This time, the might of the Tower of Three Realms was fully unlocked. In addition, you can also draw on the power of the Black Tower to a certain extent, and release the power of time, space, and slaughter. Just study this slowly on your own, Small Tower said. All right. Now then, don't bother me. I, too, have to improve myself to adjust to these new abilities. This proud tower, it was clearly the one grumbling here, yet actually turned around to say that it was Ling Han's fault. However, it was fine that he was aware of it. He did not have to concern himself with it. Ling Han smilingly said to the Empress, "Let's go." Though they had spent 10 days' time, it was not definite that they were unable to contest for first place. That was because they had not reached the summit even after traveling for 10 months, which showed how tall this peak was. Wasting 10 days would indeed have some effect, but it should not be too serious. For example, not one person had caught up to them even now, and that was clear proof. Of course, it was also possible that the others had not taken this path. This was not the only path that could reach the peak summit. The two of them walked together, hand in hand. Wisps of clouds lingered, and immediately new memory manifestations of the Celestial King appeared, but this time, they were Yang Soul in level. As expected, the heaven and earth had resonated, and would make adjustments according to every individual's differing cultivation level. Thus, a higher cultivation level did not have much advantage, either. Instead, it was one's strength in a battle of equals that determined the speed of one's advancement. Come. Ling Han laughed loudly. He had just been thinking of trying out the Black Tower's new ability. He could finally use the Black Tower to a limited extent. This made him feel very curious just what kind of level he could reach. The Tower of Three Realms was a precious tool that was at least 9th Heaven Celestial King tier in level. If it could unleash its full might, it was capable of matching a Celestial King even now, so what about using it to a limited extent? Ling Han clashed with a manifestation. He merely parried and did not counter so he would not destroy the latter in a moment of carelessness. Then, he communicated with the Black Tower on how to use the mysterious powers of time, space, and slaughter. With his comprehension ability, and added with the fact that the Black Tower was in his body in the first place, he very soon showed an expression of understanding. He pressed down a hand on a manifestation. Take in. That manifestation's body immediately shone all over, multiple seals of great Tao appearing on it, but there was no particular change. It cannot be taken in. Ling Han was shocked. He had wanted to take this manifestation directly into the Black Tower, yet he had failed. Then, let's switch. He smiled, and then pressed down his palm again. Cut. Shua, shua, shua. Countless blades of wind sliced out, slashing out at that manifestation. Every blade of wind was only a foot long, yet seals of great Tao were flickering in them, stimulating the power of the heaven and earth, and boosting it to a terrifying extent. Wherever the blades of wind swept past, the manifestations would immediately be shredded into pieces. And they were dealt with just like that. Chapter 1921, Great Fortune Appears. Chapter 1921, Great Fortune Appears. Definitely, Ling Han himself could deal with this manifestation, but it definitely would not have been so easy. The Tower of Three Realms, as expected of a precious treasure. This was only using it to a limited extent, and it was further restricted by his cultivation level, and its might was already so frightening, so how much more could it be in the future? However, why hadn't he been able to take the manifestation into the tower just now? Ling Han thought for a moment, and then a sliver of realization dawned on him. After he took it into the Black Tower, it really would fall completely within his sphere of control. Then, that definitely would require the might released from the Black Tower to be able to crush his opponent a considerable number of times for him to be able to take it in. Of course, the Black Tower was stronger than the manifestation, but the might that could be released from it now was still unable to attain as much as a good few times. The Empress managed to destroy the manifestation after some effort. Firstly, her battle prowess was weaker than Ling Han's, Secondly, she had not used the power of her divine fetus, and thirdly, she did not have the Black Tower. Thus, her speed was slightly slower than his. Consequently, another opponent appeared. Time lapse. Ling Han used the regulations of time. As he delivered a palm strike, that manifestation dispersed directly. It was not shattered by the force of his blow, but rather the continuous acceleration of time that was developed through his palm strike that had directly accelerated its time to the point of dying of old age and dispersing. Of course, if his opponent was a normal person, the effects would not be as strong. That was because Celestials had an unlimited lifespan. So what if time was accelerated and they aged? The only thing that would be affected was their attack. But these manifestations were different. They were formed from the power of heaven and earth, and it was absolutely impossible that they could exist for too long. Thus, under the time acceleration effects, they crumbled rapidly. Next, Ling Han used the regulation of slaughter. As his sword swept past, a murderous aura sword, instantly ripping these manifestations into pieces. 3 powers of regulation possessed astonishing might. After trying them all out, Ling Han was aware of the situation, and he did not waste any further time. Whenever he saw a manifestation, he would move directly, sweeping through his whole way. His speed was greatly increased from before. Previously, he and the Empress were only Emperor tiers. Though the strength of the manifestations was also considerably weaker, the ability of a monarch tier to crush his opponents was completely different from an Emperor tier. Ling Han focused on the offensive, and the Empress practically did not need to make any more moves. The speed of the two of them instantly boomed as they headed towards the summit. In the blink of an eye, another several days had passed. Yang Xianlu's ambitions soared. The summit was already close at hand, and he could be certain that this great fortune of heaven and earth had not yet been attained by anyone. Indeed, he was the one who was destined to become king. An ultimate prodigy. He strode forwards. The wisps of clouds dispersed, and he could see a huge stone ahead of him. It was about 3 meters in diameter, and had a smooth surface. He could see multiple seals flickering on it, as if they had a life of their own, and was slightly excited. This was the giant stone that the eternal prosperity celestial king had sat on. An epoch had passed, and not only had the marks of great Tao not been erased, with the boost from heaven and earth, a unique change had taken place. It was definitely not the case that the heaven and earth would resonate when a celestial king achieved Tao. Only a supreme great elite like the eternal prosperity celestial king was capable of accomplishing this. What Yang Xianlu now had to do was to sit on that giant stone. When a celestial king achieved Tao, the heaven and earth would shine, and a sliver of celestial source from the celestial king would be left behind, but after the development through an epoch, this source power had become a supremely rare treasure, and could improve a cultivator in all areas. Actually, this was similar to the immortal flame that was formed from the death of the heavenly fire celestial king. However, the heavenly fire celestial king was even more resolute. He had refined even himself, unlike the eternal prosperity celestial king, who had only left behind a sliver of benefit. Hence, this was far from possibly comparing to the flame core of the heavenly fire celestial king, but being boosted by the heaven and earth for an epoch, it was still a precious treasure among precious treasures. Closer now. Even Yang Xianlu showed an expression of excitement. As long as he sat on that stone, the accumulation from the heaven and earth throughout an epoch would surge into his body, bestowing upon him an endless fortune. It was highly possible that he would be able to catch up to those few nature-defying freaks. Involuntarily, his footsteps quickened slightly. That was because of the excitement he was feeling. It was like the stone had a life of its own. That was because there were enough prodigies here, and their battles were intense enough, and that had drawn a resonance from the heaven and earth, inciting a response from the celestial king achieving Tao stone, and forming some kind of unique change. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. His footsteps became more and more hurried, and there was only a very short distance left between him and that celestial stone. All of a sudden, a strong feeling of warning rose up in his heart. Abruptly, he raised his hand, and a white seal of light shot from the palm of his hand. Then, it enlarged, and a divine tortoise the color of earth appeared. Peng! An attack shot over, landed on the light seal, and even space itself suddenly trembled, as if a rip was about to be torn into space. Shan Jitong, Yang Xianlu stated calmly, not even turning his head. Are you regretting now? Feeling that you should not have invited me? Shan Jitong walked over from a distance, his expression calm, as if he was just taking a leisurely stroll. Yang Xianlu smiled faintly, yet did not even look at Shan Jitong. Instead, his eyes were set on one corner, and he said, Brother Lao, still not coming out? Just how long do you plan on hiding? Immediately, Shan Jitong's expression changed. That was because he had completely not discovered that Larosong was standing by in secret. If he had had an intense battle with Yang Xianlu just now, it was highly possible that Larosong would have used the opening to snatch the great fortune. And this was the problem. He had not discovered Larosong, but Yang Xianlu had. At least in detection abilities, the gap between the two of them was really quite wide. Of course, it was also possible that Yang Xianlu was just putting on a pretense of mystery, wanting to disturb his Dao heart. Hihi, Brother Yang indeed has sharp eyes and ears. I am confident that I can fool even dividing soul tears with this serpent breath celestial technique of mine, yet Brother Yang has seen through it with a single glance. Amidst soft laughter, Larosong walked out. The originally ugly expression on Shan Jitong's face involuntarily became even darker. As expected, Yang Xianlu's senses were superior to his. Yang Xianlu smiled faintly, and said, It was not that I had discovered Brother Laro's presence. I had merely recalled that since Brother Shan was here, Brother Laro would probably be close by as well. Fuck, he had actually been pulling a bluff on them. Shan Jitong immediately felt as if he was about to throw up blood. He had not thought that a prodigy the likes of Yang Xianlu would actually pull off a deception too. What if Larosong really hadn't been here? Then wouldn't it have been extremely embarrassing? Larosong's initially smiling expression involuntarily became very awkward. He set his eyes on Yang Xianlu, and suddenly broke into a smile. There was actually a strong feeling of allure emanating from him as he said, As expected of Brother Yang, both your wisdom and strength are top tier in this world. Yang Xianlu only smiled in response. Only he himself knew that he had indeed sensed Larosong's presence. That was because he had a celestial Dao physique, which was compatible with great Dao. How could he possibly be unable to sense that there was another person that appeared in his vicinity? There was no need to say that, though. There were some abilities that only he needed to be aware of. The great fortune is just ahead, to be attained by the strongest, he declared, the aura of his entire person suddenly changing. Initially, he was like an ultimate sword, but it was sheathed, revealing nothing of its sharpness. But now, the divine sword was unsheathed, exuding a world-shaking brilliance. The two of you attack together, then, he said to Shan Jitong and Larosong, his tone calm, as if he had said something that could not be more ordinary. Chapter 1922 A True Monarch Tear. Chapter 1922 A True Monarch Tear. Yang Xianlu, you are too arrogant. Shan Jitong revealed an expression of anger. Though Yang Xianlu indeed had a well-known reputation, and was known as the strongest in the severing mundane tier, they were all monarch tiers here, so how could the gap possibly be so wide that two people would have to join forces to be able to match him? He was arrogant to the point of ignorance. Yang Xianlu stood with his hands crossed behind his back, calmly asking, whether it is arrogance or not, won't you find out once you make your move? Brother Yang, what boldness! Larosong said smilingly, his smile very alluring. Merely in terms of appearance, this face really made it seem like he was actually a woman in disguise. He raised a hand, his little finger slightly raised. However, Brother Yang, you should never seek to be embarrassed. Shan Jitong, on the other hand, did not object now. His reputation no longer needed to be strengthened through victories in battles. Thus, even if he did join forces with Larosong against Yang Xianlu, so what? Who would dare doubt his worth as a prodigy? He was only teaching a person with overwhelmingly soaring confidence a lesson. Then, Yang Xianlu, come. Shan Jitong was the first to move. Xiao, he turned into a streak of shadowy light, and appeared in front of Yang Xianlu with a flash. Then, he shot out a punch. Though this was only a punch, it had raised the great aura of the heaven and earth. It was as if this fist, the only remaining existence in the whole heaven and earth, as it moved to suppress Yang Xianlu. Lao Song moved as well. Pushing out an arm, he turned it into a silver snake. It clearly bore fangs, yet did not make anyone feel that it looked twisted and ugly. Instead, it exuded a sacred might. The silver snake moved, yet took the lead even while starting slower, moving to wrap around Yang Xianlu. The silver snake coiled around Yang Xianlu's body, and suddenly constricted around him, wanting to forcibly squeeze him into pieces. Brother Yang, you have underestimated your opponent too much. Lao Song's alluring gaze flickered with fury. That was because Yang Xianlu had not countered at all, and allowed the silver snake to constrict around his body, showing a strong contempt for his opponent. Yang Xianlu only smiled faintly, and when Shan Jitong's fist blasted over, he finally stretched out a hand calmly. He freed himself from the snake, and greeted the blow with a punch of his own. Boom! A shock wave rippled out, surging out in all directions. Then, it was followed by another, and yet another. At least about 100 shock waves spread out in all directions in the form of blazing light, presenting a majestic sight. Both Shan Jitong and Lao Song were astounded. Shan Jitong was stunned. A careless punch from Yang Xianlu had parried his own attack, and furthermore, he was at a slight disadvantage at that. He had been sent flying. While he did not suffer any injury, the inferiority of his battle prowess could not be any more obvious. As for Lao Song, he was well aware of how frightening it was to have the silver snake wrapped around one's body, but Yang Xianlu had easily struggled free just now, as if that was not an image of the source snake, but merely a piece of rope that had not been tied too tightly. However, their expressions became considerably more livid. That was because Yang Xianlu was facing both of them at the same time. In a battle of 2 against 1, he was still relaxed and carefree. In fact, he had the upper hand, even. How could they be able to accept that? They were monarch tiers. Monarch tiers overlooked the 9 heavens, looking down on the mortal world, high and noble, so how could they lose? The two of you should go out and take a look, Yang Xianlu stated calmly. With how big the world is, there are as many prodigies as clouds. The two of you are overly subjective, and disregard the outside world. Do you think that you are invincible among your peers now that you have become monarch tiers? There are also differences in strength among monarch tiers. When he said the last words, his radiance shone brilliantly. That drive and that divine might could not be concealed. He, Yang Xianlu, king of the celestial path, was the true monarch. Both Shan Jitong and Lao Song were captivated. Though they had only exchanged blows once, though they still had world-shaking ultimate moves that they had yet to use, when one had reached the heights that they had, it was apparent who was stronger the moment they clashed. Yang Xianlu was indeed the strongest in the younger generation of the Eastern Celestial Realm. To say nothing of strength, just this domineering demeanor was nothing that they could compare with, making them actually feel an urge of wanting to serve him, and follow him as he conquered the world. They were shocked. As high and noble monarch tiers, how could they possibly want to follow another? But this kind of urge could not be suppressed no matter how hard they tried. Ling Han! Ling Han! Right at this moment, a voice rang out from below them. Though it was very rushed, there was an indescribably pleasant ring to it. Yang Xianlu was surprised. He naturally knew who Ling Han was, but who was this woman? There was great Tao as a barrier here, and he could not use his vision to its fullest. He could only see a vague figure. However, this figure immediately became clearer. Suddenly, an astonishingly beautiful young girl fell into his range of sight. She was truly beautiful, and also pure and delicate. How could there be such a beautiful, such a pure woman? Even with Yang Xianlu's Tao heart, he still trembled slightly. Then, he immediately regained his wits. Before reaching 9th Heaven Celestial King tier, he would not consider any matters outside of cultivation. This woman. He had definitely not invited her, though there were many that had come this time. All of them had been carefully selected by Yang Xianlu. There was definitely none that could masquerade and mix in with those he had invited. With his memory, he naturally remembered clearly whom he had invited and what they looked like. Moreover, He had not seen this young girl at the foot of the mountain, either. What superb speed! He was immediately stunned. The young girl had definitely set off later than them, yet actually arrived just a little bit later than them. This strength was truly impressive. Strange, how could he possibly be unaware that such a prodigy had emerged? Both Shan Jitong and Larosong also bore the same thoughts. To be capable of arriving just a bit later than them, this strength was truly astonishing. And while the Eastern Celestial Realm was shockingly colossal, and it was impossible for them to travel all over the Eastern Celestial Realm, knowing each and every prodigy, there should only be those few that really had truly outstanding talent. Fuck. Yang Xianlu and the others had not finished their thoughts when an expression of powerful shock appeared on their faces. That was because the young girl had not come alone, but had rather brought an army with her. An army made up of the memory manifestations of a celestial king. An army, what kind of concept was this? Only when the number had reached a certain extent could it be called an army, and behind the young girl, the number of manifestations was at least in the hundreds. They were surging forward like wild horses, wave after wave surging over. From a few hundred it became a few thousand, and then over 10,000. Heavens! Even a supreme prodigy like Yang Xianlu almost exclaimed in shock. Just who was this young girl to have actually incited the appearance of so many manifestations? More importantly, she actually still managed to be in the lead, and was not harmed by them at all. Otherwise, she would have long since been intercepted, and submerged by these manifestations. The art of fleeing was truly impressive, and furthermore, she was an overwhelmingly bold person too. She actually dared draw out so many manifestations. Wasn't she afraid that she would suffer a setback? Peng! Peng! Wisps of clouds drifted ahead, turning into a human figure, which then shot out towards the young girl. However, it had just rushed forwards when the young girl shot out a punch followed by a kick, and it was sent flying. This, very strong. Yang Xianlu and the others bore grim expressions. To be able to bring such a large troop of manifestations and barge through would only mean that this young girl's speed was high enough, but that punch previously only showed strength. A simple punch, plain and unadorned, yet it was a return to the basics, concentrating and instilling great Tao in her fist. It was as if she was saying, I myself am Tao, so who could stand in my way? Out of the way! Out of the way! The young girl rushed over on a straight course, her expression filled with impatience. Whoever doesn't get out of the way, Nyo will send him flying with a punch. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,